1. Smart, strong, foolish, and lucky. Once upon a time, 3 caterpillars lived together on a tree. One day, a gardener spotted them and cut off the infested branches, dropping them into a hole. The leaves in the hole were enough for a while, but the caterpillars needed to find a way out or face death. The strongest caterpillar declared, "I am strong enough to escape. Goodbye, brothers." True to his word, he ate a bunch of leaves and started crawling up the side of the hole, taking breaks to rest in small dugouts. On the second day, the smart caterpillar tried to climb like the other, but turned back upon realizing it wasn't working. He seemed to give up as the strong caterpillar often teased them from above. Meanwhile, the silliest caterpillar didn't do much besides eating leaves and waiting for the end. The gardener chuckled upon seeing the caterpillar climbing the hole's edge, knowing it was too deep for any of them to escape by climbing. The smart caterpillar spent the days carefully storing leaves in a dry corner to keep them from spoiling when it rained. The silly caterpillar helped him store the food and filled up on leaves without much hope. Days passed until the 7th day. The strong caterpillar became weak and exhausted, still trying his best as he was close to the top. Meanwhile, the 2 caterpillars in the hole had transformed into cocoons, and today they emerged as butterflies. The strong caterpillar suffered a stroke and fell down. The smart butterfly said, "He got what he deserved. He will die." The silly butterfly softly said, "Let's save him." So the silly butterfly pulled the pitiful caterpillar out of the hole. Time passed, and the 3 caterpillars were now beautiful butterflies, fluttering around the garden. The gardener saw them and went inside to grab a net, thinking his granddaughter would enjoy such a gift. The butterflies played carelessly, unaware of the looming danger. Whoosh! The strong butterfly quickly pushed the silly one aside, but only the smart butterfly got caught in the net. "Help! Help!" The strong butterfly sneered. "He deserves it. He will be trapped." The silly butterfly softly said, "Let's save him." So the strong butterfly helped the silly one bite at the gardener's net, but to no avail. It then attacked the gardener, making him drop the net. The silly butterfly quickly cut a small hole in the net, climbed inside, and called to the smart butterfly, "Get out of here. If he can't catch any butterfly, we'll never be safe. You're smarter than me, and it's a waste if you get trapped. Plus, his granddaughter would be sad not having anything to play with." The smart butterfly, not thinking of the risks to the one staying behind, quickly escaped the net and vanished into the sky. The strong butterfly disappeared into the bushes as the old man picked up his net, looking brighter when he saw the butterfly caught inside. He took the butterfly inside and pinned it to a card as a present for his granddaughter. Just then, his granddaughter came home. "Lisa, I have something for you." As the gardener loosened his grip, the butterfly flapped its wings. Because it was pinned, its wing tore, and it fell onto the table. The gardener turned away, saddened. "It's my fault. This butterfly has torn wings now and can't fly or be beautiful anymore. It will die a sad death. Take it outside and bury it." The little girl took the butterfly outside, where suddenly 2 butterflies swooped down, attacked her, and carried the injured butterfly away. The butterfly did not die, and its 2 friends brought food daily. It couldn't move much or find a mate, but being a silly butterfly, it never worried about those things. Life went on, and happiness is something. Conclusion: who is smart? Who is strong? Who is foolish? And who is lucky? The smart one knows they are not always smart and strong. The strong one is the one who fights their own flaws to change. The foolish one is the one who abandons friends in trouble. Everyone has been both lucky and unlucky. There's no smartest or strongest. The most foolish one loses faith in themselves, thinking they can't become smart or strong. The luckiest one in life is the one who lives among friends. Happiness is not something everyone can feel. 2. When differences are special. If you meet Lynn, it won't take long to realize he is a bit different. First off, he always looks you straight in the eye, very intently, when you talk to him. Secondly, he has a very firm handshake. It's not the cold, formal kind of handshake where it's just a gesture. No, when Lynn shakes your hand, he does it with all his heart and soul. Your hand will be squeezed tightly, and he will shake your arm so much that you'll start to understand what it was like in the old days when people had to pump water by hand. Then there's the head patting. This is where some people start to feel uncomfortable if it's their first time meeting Lynn. He has a habit of patting the heads of people he likes, especially those who treat him well on the bus. But it's not just a gentle pat or a soft touch. He will place his hand on your head, pat a few times, and then squeeze, kind of like checking if a melon is ripe. That's how I tell people I care about them, Lynn told me once on the bus. I pat their heads. It's a nice gesture. They can pat my head too if they want. The problem is, most of us aren't used to having our arms shaken or our heads patted and squeezed, especially by someone we just met on the bus, someone who stares into our eyes as if they're about to kiss us. So, Lynn faces a lot of rejection. Just the other day, he told me he tried to make friends with a family at the water park. The kids were fine, but the dad was a bit tense. Eventually, when Lynn got to the head-patting stage, the dad couldn't take it anymore. "What's wrong with you? Are you crazy?" the man snapped at Lynn. "Back off. Leave us alone." The truth is, Lynn isn't crazy. Not really. His brain was affected a bit because his mother had a difficult birth, and he has never been as quick as other people. He's 26 years old, but behaves like a child of 9 or 10. He's always neat and clean, and for a long time he washed dishes at a local children's hospital. Lynn knows he's different. He understands his limitations. But to him, different isn't wrong. In fact, he finds it interesting how different other people are, and he likes that difference. That's why he's often surprised by how some people react to him. Once, as we were walking home from the bus stop for dinner at my place, he asked, "Why are so many people afraid of me?" I started telling Lynn that the outside world can be a frightening place, and some people get anxious when they meet someone who is overly friendly. But then I realized I was talking to someone who forever sees life through the eyes of a 10-year-old. He knows all about being scared because he faces that scary world every day, alone. What could I tell him about fear? So I began to explain that some people are not comfortable with others touching them, especially those they aren't close to. But then I looked at Lynn, a person who lacks social connections to understand what being close means. He doesn't know about personal space. He's just so starved for affection that even a pat on the head becomes a declaration of love and acceptance. How could he understand complex social relationships? Actually, people aren't scared of you. I struggled to find the right words until Lynn helped me. He put his arm around me, leaned his head on my shoulder like a child, and concluded, "Some people just don't understand." "That's right, Lynn," I said, gently patting his head. "Some people just don't understand. They don't understand what it means to be different, to be special." 3. Nurturing the soul. People often say true quality will out, but in today's world it can be hard if you let others find out about your strengths on their own. Indeed, if you are good, people will eventually recognize it, but the question is, when? By then, how many opportunities might you have missed? Inner beauty, the beauty of the soul, helps you love yourself more, warms those around you, and opens up many deserved opportunities. So why not find ways to nurture, develop, and showcase it? Let's shine together. 1. Stand tall. Ever notice the grace and confidence of ballet dancers, yoga instructors, and movie stars? Emulate them. It's better for your back and more fun when you feel like a tree or a blade of grass swaying in the breeze rather than a fence post stuck in the ground. Stand with your feet grounded, knees slightly bent, core engaged, head and neck aligned with your shoulders, and relax your shoulders. With this posture, your spine will naturally curve gracefully, and instantly you'll appear taller, slimmer, and more confident. 2. Laugh a lot. Humor reduces stress and makes life's hardships more bearable. Additionally, laughter can reduce the risk of heart attacks by up to 40%, helping our body function better with stable blood sugar and health, according to researchers. Really, you don't need scientists to know that embracing and appreciating the joys of daily life without bitterness or resentment makes life much more comfortable and facilitates easier connections with others. Your sense of humor is as unique as your fingerprint. It may be innate but can certainly be developed and nurtured. Cherish life sincerely and practice becoming funnier. 3. Connect with pure joy. Maybe you feel it while walking on the beach at sunset, holding your child, during a marathon, or while doing a job you love. It's like being the main character in a movie or a touched-up photo, where time seems to stand still, the world blurs, and only you stand out, vibrant with passion and life. This is called pure joy, the most genuine ingredient of fulfillment. It's hard to define or measure, but you'll know it when you feel it, and surprisingly, others will recognize it in you too. The good news is that we can all connect with this joy. Just start identifying and paying attention to what truly satisfies you, to steer your life in a better direction. 4. Express gratitude. As children, we were often reminded by our parents to say thank you to adults, which sometimes felt bothersome. However, as we grow older and gain more experiences, and as researchers explain, many understand why it's essential to cultivate the habit of expressing sincere gratitude. Feeling grateful increases positivity, reduces pain, fatigue, and enhances performance in both learning and work. It also improves alertness, enthusiasm, determination, and focus. Gratitude helps you feel a stronger connection and inspires you to be ready to help a relative, colleague, or neighbor. It also involves acknowledging the good in those around you. While it may sound elaborate, genuine gratitude truly uplifts the soul, makes you love life more, and has a strong contagious effect, making everyone agree that you are much more beautiful. 5. Have more fun. Splash through a stream or a puddle, spend an afternoon at the amusement park, go dancing, invite your 3 best friends over, and listen to your favorite songs. Do whatever it takes to make joy a priority, like a child, and do it often. Sometimes the best way to express our inner beauty is through big, relaxed, even wild smiles. Of course, we agree that adult life is hard, demanding much effort and sacrifice with endless responsibilities. So, of course, we need escapes. And sometimes the best escape isn't a glass of wine, a bubble bath, or a good book, but letting the expert child within you, that 10-year-old who was always cheerful and energetic, take over. This expert will add a sparkle to your eyes, a bounce to your step, and help you find ways to be happy. 6. Be generous. You could tutor a child, help a lost child find their parent, assist an elderly person across the street, or donate meals to needy hospital patients. You may not expect anything in return, but truly, when you give, you receive more. The first thing you gain is a wonderful feeling as your brain releases chemicals that boost your mood, and this act of helping also activates brain areas important for planning and organizing life. You might even live longer, believe it or not, as studies have shown. Whether you volunteer for a day at an event or help a neighbor with small tasks, what matters is feeling the goodness in your life and sharing it with others around you. 7. Know your priorities and your limits. This requires you to balance acting for what's important to you and for others. To do this, you must understand and respect yourself enough to make choices that reflect your highest priorities, and also find gentle and kind ways to speak your truth. Of course, this is a lifelong practice and not something you can improve overnight. Start by reorganizing your life, identifying what's important and what's not, and then look into your mirror neurons to avoid becoming selfish or overly self-centered. Mirror neurons are a smart group of brain cells that ensure human connections by creating empathy, making you yawn when someone else does, or feel cold when your child runs outside in winter with just a thin jacket. Recognizing and acting based on your needs while respecting others' feelings will make you greatly cherished by everyone. 4. The clock and the comb. Once upon a time, there was a very poor man who lived with his wife. One day, his wife, who had very long hair, asked him about getting a new comb to use. The man felt sad because he couldn't afford to buy her something new. He didn't have enough money to buy a new comb as he barely earned enough to cover their daily meals. He also didn't dare to get his broken old watch fixed. Knowing this, his wife never pressed him about it. One day, while returning from work and passing by a watch shop, he decided to sell his watch. With the little money he got, he bought a new comb for his wife. He came home in the evening and presented this small gift to his wife. However, he was surprised to see his beloved wife with short hair. She had sold her hair to buy him a new watch. Tears rolled down both of their cheeks as they hugged and cried in happiness. Although life was tough, they had the love and support of each other, which was the most precious gift they could receive. 5. The wound. A boy had a bad habit of losing his temper easily. One day, his father gave him a bag of nails and told him, "Whenever you get angry, run to the back of the house and hammer a nail into the wooden fence." On the first day, the boy hammered 37 nails into the fence. Over the following weeks, he learned to control his anger, and the number of nails he hammered each day gradually decreased. He found it easier to hold back his anger than to hammer a nail into the fence. Eventually, there came a day when he didn't lose his temper at all. He told his father, and his father suggested that he should pull out a nail from the fence for every day that he managed to keep his temper under control. As days passed, the boy eventually reported to his father that there were no more nails left in the fence. They both went to the fence, and his father pointed out, "You've done well, but look at the holes in the fence. It's no longer the same. Words said in anger leave scars just like these holes. No matter how many times you apologize, the scars remain. Emotional wounds are like physical wounds. People around us are precious. They make us laugh, support us in every situation, listen to us when we struggle, cheer for us, and always have their hearts open for us. Remember these words." 6. The moon and the sun. The moon and the sun were arguing about the earth. The sun said, "The leaves and trees, they're all green." But the moon thought differently, claiming they all had a shimmering silver glow. The moon mentioned that people on earth often sleep, while the sun argued that they are always active. "Why is it so quiet on earth then?" the moon argued. "Who says it's quiet? Earth is bustling with activity and it's quite noisy," the sun replied, surprised. They argued for a long time until the wind passed by. "Why are you arguing about this? I've been with the sun when it looks down on earth, and I've also been with the moon when it rises. During the day when the sun is out, everything is green and people are active. But when the moon rises and night falls, everyone drifts into sleep," the wind explained. "If you only see things from your own perspective, nothing seems perfect or complete. You can't judge Earth by just the view of the sun or the moon." Similarly, when evaluating a person or a situation, it's important not to see it from just one side.
Hey everyone, Your comments truly matter, offering insights and motivation to others and uplifting our creative team at Lighthouse of Wisdom channel. Sharing your thoughts and experiences enriches our community. So, let's get the conversation started below and help illuminate our path with your wisdom.
7. Butterfly wings. One day, a person found a butterfly cocoon. Eventually, a small hole appeared in it. He watched the butterfly for hours as it struggled to break through this tiny opening. It seemed to have reached its limits. It had done all it could and could not go further. So, the man decided to help the butterfly. He took scissors and snipped the cocoon. The butterfly then easily emerged, but it had a swollen body and small, shriveled wings. The man continued to watch the butterfly because he expected that, at any moment, the wings would enlarge and expand enough to support its body, while the body would shrink. Nothing happened. In fact, the butterfly spent its entire life crawling around with a swollen body and crumpled wings. It was never able to fly. The kind-hearted but hasty man didn't realize that the struggle required for the butterfly to get through the tiny hole was nature's way of pushing fluid from the body into the wings to prepare it for flying once it was free. Sometimes the struggles we face are exactly what we need in our lives. If life had no obstacles, it would cripple us. We would not be as strong as we could have been. We wouldn't be able to soar. 8. 2 grains of rice. There were 2 grains of rice that were saved to be used as seeds for the next season because both were good quality, big, strong, and solid. One day, the owner decided to plant them in a nearby field. The first grain thought to itself, "Why should I go out to the field with the owner? I don't want my whole body to disintegrate in the soil. It's best to keep all the nutrients inside this shell and find an ideal place to stay." So it hid in a secluded corner of the grain storage. Meanwhile, the second grain was eager to be sown by the owner. It was thrilled at the prospect of starting a new life. As time passed, the first grain dried up in the corner of the house because it didn't get any water or light. Eventually, its nutrients were of no use, and it slowly withered away. In contrast, the second grain, though it broke apart in the soil, sprouted into a shining golden rice plant, heavy with grains. It brought new life into the world. Never enclose yourself in a solid shell, trying to preserve a meaningless integrity. Instead, be brave, endure disintegration silently, and contribute to the field of life like the second seed chose to do. I hope this will also be the choice you and I make when facing the vast field of life. 9. The perfect life. Once upon a time, there was a little girl who always dreamed of having a perfect life. One day, she prayed to God to grant her everything she desired. God appeared and told the girl, "Go ahead on the windy road in front of you, where there are hundreds of millions of small stones. I give you 365 days to find the largest stone you can. The bigger the stone, the more I will grant you. But once you pass a stone, you cannot go back. So think carefully before you pick one." The girl was overjoyed and began her journey on the windy road to seek the greatest happiness for her life. However, every time she came across a large stone along the way, she hesitated and told herself, "Maybe the next stone will be even bigger." Days, weeks, and months passed until she nearly reached the end of the road and realized she was running out of time and chances to choose big stones. So, she had to settle for a small stone by the roadside. Life is just like that. We are always searching for the perfect partner, the perfect job, the perfect house, the perfect car. And we never realize how much time and opportunity we are wasting. There's never a perfect timing to precisely express what you want to someone at exactly the right moment, or to do exactly the job you want to do in life. So why not live for today and enjoy every moment you have in this life? 10. Unable to fix. A woman was waiting for her flight in the lounge of a busy airport. To pass an hour, she bought a magazine and a pack of cookies to snack on. She sat in the VIP area, relaxing and starting to read in peace. On the same bench, next to her cookies, a man sat down, opened his newspaper, and quietly read. When the woman ate the first cookie, the man also took the next one. She didn't say anything but felt annoyed inside, thinking, "This is outrageous. If I weren't trying to be polite, I'd let him know just how absurd he is." Each time she took a cookie, the man took the next one. She grew increasingly annoyed but kept her cool. When only one cookie was left, she thought, "Okay, let's see how this bold man handles this." But he calmly broke the last cookie in half and offered her one half. Oh, the nerve, especially when she was still hungry. She abruptly stood up, packed up her magazine, grabbed her half of the cookie, and headed straight to her plane. Once seated on the plane, she searched her bag for her glasses and was shocked to find an unopened pack of cookies inside. She felt ashamed of her mistake. She had kept the entire pack of cookies in her bag without realizing it. Meanwhile, the man had shared his cookies without getting angry or making a scene. As she sat there feeling confused and embarrassed, thinking about the man, she realized she no longer had time to explain or apologize. In life, there are 4 things you can't take back: a stone after it's thrown, a word after it's said, an opportunity after it's missed, time after it's gone. 11. $2. A father came home very late, tired and irritated after a busy day at work. As soon as he got home, his 5-year-old son, who had been waiting for him, asked, "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Sure, what is it?" the father replied. "Dad, how much money do you make in an hour?" "That's none of your business. Why do you want to know?" the father responded, losing his patience. "I just really want to know," the boy pleaded. "If you must know, I make $2 an hour." "Oh," the boy hesitated, then asked, "Dad, can I borrow $1?" The father became very annoyed. "If the only reason you want to know how much I earn is to borrow money for some silly toys, then go to your room and go to bed. Think about why you're being so selfish. I work hard all day and I don't have time for this." The boy quietly went to his room and shut the door. The father sat down, growing even more frustrated. Why would his son ask such a thing? An hour later, having calmed down, the father thought maybe his son really needed the money for something important and felt maybe he had been too harsh. He went to his son's room. "Are you asleep?" "No, Dad. I'm still awake," the boy replied from his bed. "I've been thinking, maybe I was too hard on you. Here's $1. The boy took the money and then reached under his pillow, pulling out some more coins. The father, seeing that his son already had some money, became upset again. As the boy neatly arranged the money, the father grumbled, "Why do you need more money if you already have some?" "Because I didn't have enough," the boy exclaimed joyfully, looking up. "Now I do. Dad, here are $2. Can I buy an hour of your time?" 12. Two friends. Two friends were walking through a desert. During their long journey, they had a heated argument. Unable to stay calm, one of the friends slapped the other. The one who was slapped felt hurt but said nothing. Instead, he silently wrote in the sand, "Today, my best friend slapped me in the face." They continued walking until they found an oasis where they decided to rest and cool off in the water. While bathing, the friend who had been slapped accidentally slipped into a muddy patch and started sinking. The other friend quickly rescued him. After recovering, the nearly drowned friend carved into a rock. "Today, my best friend saved my life." The friend who had slapped and then saved his companion was surprised and asked, "Why did you write on the sand when I hurt you, but on a rock now?" The answer he received was, "When someone hurts us, We should write it in the sand where the winds of forgiveness can erase it away. But when we receive something good from someone, we must carve it into stone where no wind can ever erase it. We should learn to write our pains in the sand and carve our joys and happiness into stone so they remain forever. 13. No price tag. A farmer had some puppies for sale. He put up a sign on the fence post and was hammering in the last nail when he felt a tug at his shirt. Looking down, he saw a little boy. "Excuse me, sir," the boy said. "I'd like to buy one of your puppies." "All right," the farmer replied as he wiped sweat off his neck. "These puppies come from good parents, so they aren't cheap." The boy looked down for a moment, then reached deep into his pocket and pulled out a handful of coins. "I have 39 cents. Can I just look at them?" "Of course," the farmer said, and he whistled. "Come here, Dolly," he called loudly. From their little house, Dolly and 3 other adorable puppies bounded down the hill. The boy pressed his face against the chain-link fence, his eyes sparkling with excitement. As the cute puppies came close, he noticed something still stirring inside their house. Slowly, another puppy appeared, significantly smaller than the others. It clumsily slid down the hill and started hobbling over to the rest. It struggled to keep up with its siblings. "I want that one," the boy said, pointing to the smallest puppy. The farmer knelt down beside him and said, "Son, you don't want that puppy. It will never be able to run and play with you like the others." Hearing this, the boy stepped back a few paces from the fence, bent down and began pulling up the leg of his pants. Gradually, a pair of iron braces running along his legs and attached to specially made shoes were revealed. Looking up at the farmer, the boy said, "You see, sir, I don't run very well myself, and that little dog will need someone who understands." The farmer gently picked up the small puppy and handed it to the boy. "How much?" the boy asked. "There's no charge," the farmer answered. "Love doesn't have a price." 14. The Scar. A young boy invited his mother to his first parent-teacher meeting at elementary school, and to his dismay, she accepted. It was the first time his friends and his homeroom teacher would meet his mom. He felt embarrassed about his mom's appearance. Despite being a beautiful woman, she had a large scar covering almost the entire right side of her face. The boy never wanted to ask why his mom had such a big scar. At the meeting, everyone was impressed by his mother's gentleness and her natural beauty, despite the noticeable scar. But the boy felt embarrassed and hid in a corner away from everyone, where he overheard his mom talking to his teacher. "How did you get that scar on your face?" the boy's teacher asked. His mother replied, "When my son was little, he was in a room that caught fire. Everyone was too scared to enter because the flames were so high, but I ran in. As I reached him, I saw a beam falling towards him, and I quickly shielded him with my body. I was knocked unconscious, but fortunately, a firefighter saved us both." Touching the wrinkled scar on her face, she added, "This scar cannot be healed, but to this day, I have no regrets about what I did." Hearing this, the boy ran out from his hiding spot to his mother, tears streaming down his face. He hugged her and felt the depth of her sacrifice for him. He held her hand tightly for the rest of the day. 15. Bill. Peter is the son of a grocery store owner at the end of the street. He often goes to his mom's store to hang out. Every day, the store has several bills to pay or collect, which need to be mailed to customers. Peter is usually tasked by his mom to take these bills to the post office. Over time, handling these tasks made him feel like he was becoming a little businessman himself. One day, Peter thought, "I should write a bill for Mom detailing the amount she owes me for the help I provide every day." The next morning, his mom received the bill stating, "Mom needs to pay her son Peter the following amounts: transporting items home, 2 coins; Delivering letters to the post office, 1 coin. Helping adults clean up the garden, 2 coins. Being good and obedient all week, 1 coin. Total, 6 coins. Peter's mom didn't say anything. At dinner, Peter found 6 coins under his plate as his payment. He was thrilled, but just as he was about to put the money in his pocket, he noticed another bill addressed to him, which surprised him. Peter needs to pay his mom the following amounts. Living 10 years in mom's happy home, 0 coins. Expenses for food, education, and living for 10 years, 0 coins. Money for mom's care whenever Peter was sick, 0 coins. Having a loving mom to take care of him all these years, 0 coins. Total, 0 coins. Peter read the bill over and over, feeling ashamed and his face turning red. After a while, he went over to his mom and cuddled up to her, gently putting the 6 coins back in her pocket. 16. Why do women cry? When God created women, He made them truly unique. He gave them strong shoulders to carry the weight of the world, gentle hands to spread love, and an inner strength to bear children. To handle these tough tasks, He also gave them tears to shed whenever they need, and that's their only weakness. A young boy asked his mother, "Why do you cry?" She replied, "Because I am a woman." "I don't understand," the boy exclaimed. His mother hugged him tightly and said gently, "You might never understand, but that's just how it is." As time went by, the boy asked his father, "Why does Mom cry?" "All women do that, my dear," his father smiled and answered. As the boy grew up into a man, he still often wondered, why do women cry? Eventually, he sought the wisdom of a sage. Upon hearing his question, the sage calmly explained, "When God made women, He made their shoulders strong enough to carry the world, their hands gentle enough to care for love, and their spirit resilient enough to go through childbirth. He endowed them with courage to nurture and take care of their family, loved ones, and friends even when everyone else seems to give up, and no matter how tough it gets, they never complain. He gave them the emotion to love their children unconditionally, even when those children cause them pain. He gave them the strength to take care of their husbands, avoiding pitfalls because God made them from the ribs of men to protect their hearts. He gave them the wisdom to know that a good husband would never hurt his wife, understanding a woman's endurance, and she always lingers behind each of his successes. To handle these tough tasks, He also gave them tears to shed whenever they need, and that's their only weakness. When you see them cry, tell them how much you love them, and if they keep crying, try to bring peace to their hearts. 17. Change. There was once a frog placed in a pot of cold water. The pot was uncovered and then set on a stove. At first, while the water was still cold, the frog did not react. Gradually, as the water warmed up, the frog failed to notice. Why? Because the temperature of the water increased slowly, making the frog accustomed to it. As time went on, the water temperature continued to rise, but the frog still didn't pay any attention because the increase was gradual. It wasn't until the water began to boil that the frog started to feel uncomfortable, but by then, it was too late. The frog ended up being boiled in that pot. This is a classic story about change. Since the water heated up gradually, the frog didn't notice and ultimately died in the boiling water. Suppose the frog had been placed in already hot water without a lid. It surely would have jumped out immediately. This is similar to human life. We become accustomed to our daily routines and often resist change or even fear it. But in reality, our lives change every day, and if we don't pay attention, it might be too late. When faced with a sudden, clear change, we panic and fear it. Can we handle this change? Can we accept it? Or is it too late by then? Always be prepared for any change. Carefully observe what is happening around you. Face and accept the changes occurring so that you can adapt appropriately. 18. If I had the chance to live twice, what would I do? Well, I'd make sure never to forget anyone's birthday. I wouldn't miss an opportunity to share my feelings, and I would take the time to stop and truly listen. I would spend time with friends just because they are my friends. I'd also plan vacations with my beloved family. I'd spend time listening to the whimsical adventures of a 5-year-old. I would devote more time to making someone feel beautiful and valued. I'd lie back on a hill with lush green grass, listening to the sound of my own laughter. I'd share my feelings with those who love me. I would cherish every little thing in a day, a hug in the early morning, a smile from a stranger, a family dinner, a smile during a wrong number call. If life could be lived twice, I'd live in a way that leaves no room for regret and let those I love know it every day. I wouldn't let time slip by without letting my loved ones know they are an important part of my life. Living every moment fully is the way to always remember that nothing and no one is insignificant in your life. 19. The duck's wish for wings. Once upon a time, long, long ago, there was a little white duck who traveled alone on the moonlit path. Tired yet determined, the duck always wondered why ducks had such short wings. He dreamed of having long wings like the seagulls, gliding through the soft breeze under the vast sun, and seeing the expansive lands from high above. One day, the duck met the moon. "Dear moon, why aren't my wings long like the seagulls?" the duck asked the kindly moon with a loud, yearning voice. The moon gently looked at the duck and replied, "The seagull spends its days over the open sea, while you live comfortably on land, so you don't need long wings." Unsatisfied, the duck did not want to settle for its short wings. It longed for longer ones, so it pleaded, "But I want long wings, can you help me, moon?" After a thoughtful pause, the moon nodded in agreement. From high above, a beam of brilliant white light shone down, transforming the duck's short wings into long, pristine ones. The duck joyously flapped its new wings, admiring this great achievement. Suddenly, a cold wind carrying the salty sea air blew fiercely, causing the duck to struggle. It flapped hard against the harsh wind. And so, the wind continued to blow, and the duck kept flapping tirelessly, being pushed toward the vast, year-round blue ocean. Exhausted and hungry, the duck wanted to give up everything. It realized that having short, comfortable wings was better than long wings that required constant, exhausting effort. Life is often like that. People sometimes wish for wings to freely soar, but not everyone understands if those wings are truly useful or not. Having wings means carrying a burden, and only through perseverance can one overcome challenges. 20. Life isn't as bad as you think. Once there was a poor man living with his wife, 5 sons, and daughter-in-law in a small, damp, old wooden house. They were struggling a lot, which made him very discouraged. One day, he decided to seek help from a wise man. He told the wise man, "My whole family lives in this tiny wooden house. It's very cramped and we argue all day long. Life feels like hell. I don't want to live like this anymore." The wise man asked what the man had in his house. He replied that he only had a cow, a mountain goat, and some chickens. The wise man then advised, "Just do what I tell you, and things will improve." He instructed the man to bring the cow, goat, and chickens inside to live with them. The poor man was surprised but agreed to follow the advice. A few days later, the man returned to the wise man, looking miserable, and said, "What kind of advice did you give me? Things didn't get better, they got even worse. Now my house really is a hell. I can't stand it anymore." The wise man smiled and told him, "All right, go home and take the chickens out of the house." Not long after, the man came back again. still looking sad and crying. "The goat has chewed up everything in the house, turning my life into a nightmare." The wise man calmly said, "Put the goat outside." Later, the man complained again to the wise man, "The cow has turned my house into a stable. How can people live with animals?" The wise man advised, "Then go home and put the cow outside too." A few days later, the poor man came back, this time with a bright face. He told the wise man, "Thank you for helping me find a sweet life. Now all the livestock are outside, and my tiny house feels quiet, spacious, and clean. I'm so happy." Circumstances might not be what you want, and they might look really bad from the outside, but there are many things worse than your situation. So don't get too down or discouraged no matter what happens. Stay positive, and you'll see that life is truly beautiful. 21. Facing pain with calmness. After a fire, two brothers from the Lai family were found amidst the rubble. They were the last survivors of the incident. Although they escaped death, the fire had severely burned their faces. They were quickly taken to the hospital for treatment. The older brother often complained to the doctors, "I look like this because of the burns. How will I face people tomorrow? How will I support myself? Living is harder than dying." The younger brother, on the other hand, often advised him, "Only the two of us survived this accident, so our lives are extremely precious, and our lives still have much meaning." After being discharged from the hospital, the older brother lived daily haunted by the fire and felt inferior due to others' mockery. Gradually, he lost his faith in life and no longer had the courage to continue living. Eventually, he took his own life. Meanwhile, the younger brother constantly reminded himself, "The value of my life is more precious than anything." No matter how much others teased or were indifferent, he endured, held his head high, and bravely continued living. One day, while delivering goods, he saw someone standing on a nearby bridge. Sensing something was wrong, he stopped and ran towards the bridge. Before he could reach the person, the young man jumped into the river. Without a second thought, the younger brother also jumped in to save him. It turned out that the young man was very wealthy but had attempted suicide due to the shock of a breakup. After this incident, the young man calmed down and, in gratitude for his life being saved, decided to help the younger brother. Thanks to this, the younger brother gradually progressed from running a small transport company to owning a well-known firm. Facing pain with calmness, no matter the difficulty, never lose heart. The scariest thing is to hastily surrender to difficulties, to choose to retreat in the face of adversity. If we courageously hold our heads high and walk on, ready to face external pressures, perhaps adversity itself will lead us to a new, more interesting life. Facing pain with calmness, no matter the difficulty, never lose heart. The scariest thing is to hastily surrender to difficulties, to choose to retreat in the face of adversity. If we courageously hold our heads high and walk on, ready to face external pressures, perhaps adversity itself will lead us to a new, more interesting life. 22. Love gives life meaning. I'm only 12 years old, but I already know what sadness feels like, and I'm very afraid of death, especially when I think about my grandfather. He suffers from a disease called emphysema, which he developed from smoking since his high school days. It's a terrible illness that can destroy a person's respiratory system completely. Since my grandmother passed away, my grandfather has been very sad and sometimes even angry at life. He has become grumpy and sometimes says hurtful things to nice people. However, when he's with me, he shows a softer side. Recently, he got very sick and had to undergo throat surgery and use a breathing machine to breathe. The doctors said his days were numbered, but miraculously he recovered. He no longer needs the breathing machine, but he still can't speak properly. His words are just weak, raspy sounds now. When he was in the hospital, my mom and I went to visit him. We were afraid it might be our last chance to see him. When we entered his room, I was shocked by how ill he looked. He was so weak, he could hardly grumble a few words, but somehow he looked at me and managed to murmur, "Grand, kid." "What did you say?" I whispered. He didn't have the strength to respond anymore. All his remaining energy went into those barely understandable words. "Grand, kid." The next morning, Mom and I had to leave. I carried with me the nagging question of what he had tried to tell me. It wasn't until a week after we got home that I finally understood what he meant. A nurse from the hospital where he was treated called my family. She relayed exactly what my grandfather had asked her to say. "Please tell my granddaughter that I love her." At first I was confused. Why had he only said love? Why hadn't he said I love you? Then it hit me. What he had tried to say that day in the hospital was, "Grandpa loves you." I was so moved. I felt like crying, and I did cry. After weeks of suffering, he finally got to say it. I call him every night. Usually, after about 5 minutes, he has to stop because he's still not well. But before we hang up, he always says, "Grandpa loves you," and "I would do anything for you." His heartfelt words, "You are my only reason for living," are the best words I've ever received in my life. He will never be as healthy as before, and I know our time together is limited. I feel honored that he chose me to share his feelings with. The love he has for me is so deep. The 3 words, "Grandpa loves you," might seem simple, but they really mean the world. They are what give life its meaning. 23. The Jar of Life. A professor was giving a lecture on time management. He set a few items in front of him. First, he took a large jar and began filling it with golf balls. After that, he asked the students, "Do you think the jar is full?" The students replied, "Yes." Next, the professor took a box full of pebbles and poured them into the jar. He shook it slightly, and the pebbles filled the gaps between the golf balls. He asked again, and this time the students hesitated a bit more but answered, "Maybe so." Then the professor grabbed a bucket of sand and poured it into the jar. Naturally, the sand filled up all the remaining spaces. He asked once more, and this time the students unanimously agreed, "Yes, it's full." "Look," the professor said as he pulled out 2 cans of beer and poured them into the jar. The beer seeped into the sand. "Now," said the professor, "I want you to think of this jar as your life. The golf balls represent the important things, your family, children, health, friends, and passions. Things that, if everything else was lost, would still make your life fulfilling. The pebbles are the other, less important things, your job, house, car. The sand is everything else, the small stuff. If you put the sand in first," he continued, "there's no room for the pebbles or golf balls. The same goes for life. If you spend all your time and energy on the small stuff, you'll never have room for the things that are truly important. Prioritize your children, your health, having dinner with family, and doing things you love. Once you've done all that, you'll still have time for the lesser things like cleaning the house or fixing things. So, always prioritize the big things and put them in your jar first." The classroom was silent after he spoke. Then a hand went up, and a student asked, "Professor, what does the beer represent?" The professor smiled, pleased with the question. "Great question. The beer," he said, "is there to remind you that no matter how full your life may seem, there's always room for a couple of beers with friends. When you feel overwhelmed and think 24 hours a day aren't enough, remember this jar. Put the big things in first. And don't forget to enjoy some beers." 24. Strive in every small task. A recent college graduate went to Shenzhen to look for a job. After a week of fruitless job hunting and an unfortunate incident where his wallet was stolen on a bus, leaving him without money or identification, he had to resort to scavenging through trash to survive. One day, while he was rummaging through garbage, he felt someone watching him. Turning around, he saw an older man who handed him a business card. "Our company is hiring. Why don't you check it out?" The next day, the young man went to the address on the card. He found himself in a bustling room with 50, 60 people waiting, many dressed in formal suits. Feeling out of place and intimidated, he almost left but eventually decided to stay. When he showed the business card to the hiring manager, she reached out her hand and said, "Congratulations, you've got the job. This is the card of our CEO. He told us that if a young man comes in with this card, we should hire him right away." So, without an interview, the student got the job at the company. Through hard work, he was later promoted to vice president. During a casual conversation, the young man asked the CEO, "Why did you choose me for the job?" The CEO always smiled mysteriously and said, "I can tell people's potential. I saw that you were a rare talent." Years later, as the company grew, the CEO had to move to a new city to expand the business. Before leaving, he entrusted the young man with managing the old operations. On their last day together at the airport's first-class lounge, the CEO said, "You probably still wonder why I chose you. That day, I randomly saw you picking up trash, and I watched you for a long time. I noticed that after you picked what you needed, you carefully put everything else back into the bin. I thought, someone who is meticulous even in such tough circumstances deserves a chance, and someone who isn't careless about small things is bound to succeed in life." 25. Nurturing dreams. There was a boy who grew up in an orphanage and always dreamed of flying like a bird in the sky. He couldn't understand why the large animals at the zoo could fly while he could not. "Why can't I fly?" he wondered. "Is there something unusual about me?" Near the orphanage lived a young boy whose legs were paralyzed. His only wish was to walk and run like his peers. He often pondered, "Why can't I be like them?" One day, the orphan boy went to the park and happened to meet the boy with the disability playing in the sand. He approached to make friends and asked if the boy ever wished he could fly like a bird. "No," replied the boy with paralyzed legs, "but I always wonder what it feels like to walk and run like the other kids." "It's nothing special," said the boy who wanted to fly. "Hey, why don't we become friends?" "Sure, I'd like that." Then the two boys played together for hours, building sandcastles and making funny noises. They looked at each other with faces bright with joy. The corner of the park was filled with their laughter. The fun stopped when the father of the boy with paralyzed legs came with a wheelchair to take his son home. The boy who wanted to fly ran up to his father and whispered something in his ear. "All right," his father nodded. Then the boy ran back to his new friend and said, "You're my only friend. I wish I could do something to help you walk and run like me. But here's what I can do." With that, he turned around and asked his friend to climb onto his back. Then he ran across the park's grass. The first steps were short and wobbly, but soon he was running faster and smoother. His friend clung tightly to his neck, gaining strength. As the wind blew strongly in their faces, the father stood silently, watching, his eyes tearing up. His disabled son spread his arms wide, struggling against the wind, and shouted, "I'm flying, Dad, I'm flying!" 26. The Soul and Love of the Swan. My sophomore year in college was nearly over. On a sweltering night in late May, my mom called me in my dorm to say I'd be spending the summer at my grandparents' farm to help out. Everyone at home was pleased with this plan. I wasn't fully convinced, but I reassured myself it was just for a summer. After finishing my final exams, I packed up my car, said goodbye to my friends, and promised to see them in the fall. It took me 3 hours to drive from college to the farm. My grandparents were both over 70 and needed help around the farm since my grandfather couldn't handle everything alone, like mowing the grass or fixing up the barn. I arrived late that afternoon. Grandma had cooked so much that we couldn't possibly eat it all. She was incredibly loving and caring. I thought her warmth might fade after staying for a while, but it didn't. Grandpa wanted to know everything about my life. By bedtime, I felt everything would be okay since it was just one summer. The next morning, Grandpa made breakfast for us since Grandma was tired from the previous day's work. I decided not to ask her for any help during my stay. I was there to help, not to be a burden. That morning, Grandpa surprised me. He seemed so energetic and agile as we left the house. Despite his age, he was confident and knew every corner of the farm. As we checked on the livestock, he knew each of the nearly 200 cattle by sight. We didn't do much work that first day, but I was impressed by all he had achieved over the years. Although he wasn't formally educated, he had raised 4 children through farming. I was deeply impressed by that. Weeks passed, and by June we had gathered and stored all the hay. I got used to working daily with Grandpa, who planned our tasks well. In the evenings, I'd read or talk with Grandma. She never tired of my school stories or any other topic. She told me about how she first met Grandpa, his love for her, and the look in his eyes she always remembered. On the last Sunday of June, Grandpa and I went fishing since we had finished our chores. Near the forest, there was a pond where he had released fish in previous years. That morning, we drove to the pond and checked on the livestock on the way. We couldn't have imagined what we would find. One of the swans Grandpa had given Grandma for their golden anniversary had died. The surviving swan refused to eat and kept looking into the distance. "Why don't we get another swan to replace it?" I suggested, hoping to help. After a pause, Grandpa said, "It's not that simple, my dear. Swans mate for life. You can bring another swan, but it won't replace the companion it has lost. We can't do much for the remaining swan. It has to cope on its own." We caught enough fish for lunch that morning. On the way back, Grandpa told me not to mention the swan to Grandma. She didn't go to the pond much anymore, so it wouldn't help to tell her. A few days later, we saw the remaining swan lying exactly where its mate had been found, and it had also died. July began with us building a new fence. On July 12th, Grandma passed away. I woke up late that morning, and Dr. Morgan, a retired neighbor and longtime family friend, was sitting at the kitchen table. Immediately, I sensed something was wrong. Grandma had died suddenly of a stroke. My parents arrived that afternoon, and family and friends gathered quickly at the old house. The funeral was held the next day because Grandpa insisted on it. The following Monday, he said at breakfast, "This is a busy farm. Those of us left need to get back to work." Most relatives had left, but Grandpa was not one to easily share his grief. There was talk of convincing him to give up farming. My parents thought he was too old to live alone, but he paid no mind to that. I was proud of how he asserted himself. The rest of the summer went by. I sensed something different about Grandpa, but wasn't sure. I started to wonder if he'd be better off with someone else, but I knew he wouldn't leave the farm. As September approached, I didn't want to leave. I even considered skipping the fall semester to stay longer with him. When I mentioned this, he immediately objected, saying my place was at college, not there. Eventually, it was time to pack up the car and leave. I shook hands and hugged him goodbye. As I drove off, I saw him in the rearview mirror waving before heading back to start his morning routine. That's the image of him I keep in my mind. One stormy morning back at college, Mom called to tell me Grandpa had passed away. A neighbor had found him in the kitchen that morning. He died of a stroke, just like Grandma. In that moment, I finally understood what Grandpa had been trying to tell me about the swan that morning by the pond. 27. 7 Life in Many Colors. Life is full of colors and is more complex than we might think. Sad, disappointed, lost faith. Those are nothing to someone like me who has experienced a range of emotions. Happiness is fragile and hard to hold on to. It never lasts forever. It seems we never realize what we have until it's gone. Only then do we feel the regret of letting something precious slip away. Does life still have meaning when people treat each other with layers of invisible masks every day? Can we truly trust anyone when everyone seems to be deceiving each other? Why do we hide our flaws and then scrutinize others, criticizing them for this and that? There are even those who harm others' reputations out of jealousy. Do they realize that they are diminishing their own worth and losing their self-respect? Is it really that hard to be genuine with one another? In today's modern, developed society, does humanity still exist when people resolve conflicts with fists and weapons, causing pain and suffering to their loved ones? Is there any justice left when everything can be smoothly settled with money, trading peace of mind for injustice to others just for some dirty money? What to do? I don't understand why I've become so distrustful of the life before me. I feel like I can't trust anyone anymore. Am I that desperate? Maybe when I can't cry anymore and everything becomes too much, all I can do is laugh, throw myself into work to try to forget everything and soothe the heartache I'm carrying. Laughing is the only way to hide my true feelings, so no one knows just how desperate I really am. At this point, I am truly exhausted from facing everything alone, tired both physically and emotionally. But what is the right thing to do? 28. Listen to simplicity. Not long ago, I was going through a rough patch in life, something many of us might relate to. During that time, everything seemed dull and uninteresting. My health declined and my enthusiasm and passion had faded. This negatively impacted my life and work. Every morning, I would grit my teeth and tell myself, life continues its usual dull routine. I must get through this. I have to. But the dull days stretched on, and my feeling of paralysis and hopelessness seemed to worsen. It was then I realized I needed help. I went to see a doctor. He was older and seemed a bit gruff. However, beneath his stern exterior, I discovered a deeply wise and experienced person. I shared my feelings of being stuck in a rut. "Can you help me?" I asked. "I don't know," he replied slowly, leaning back and staring at me intently. Then, suddenly, he asked, "As a child, what was your favorite place?" "From my childhood," I responded. "Why do you ask?" "I guess it was the beach. My family had a beach house. We all loved it there." The doctor looked out the window, watching the autumn leaves fall, and then said, "Can you do exactly as I say for one day?" "I think so," I eagerly replied. "All right. Tomorrow, drive to the beach by yourself and don't be late. Arrive before 9 a.m. You can have lunch, but no reading, writing, listening to the radio, or talking to anyone. Also," he added, "I'll give you a prescription. Take 1 dose every 3 hours." He then tore a sheet of paper into 4 pieces, wrote something on each, folded them, numbered them, and handed them to me. "Take these doses at 9 a.m., noon, 3 p.m., and 6 p.m. in that order." "Are you serious?" I asked, astonished. He laughed. "You won't think I'm joking when I charge you for this consultation." The next morning, with slight hope in the doctor's unusual prescription, I drove to the beach alone. A northeast wind blew, the sea looked gray, and the waves crashed angrily. I sat in my car, facing a long and empty day ahead. Then I opened the first piece of paper. It read, "Listen carefully." I was confused. The doctor had banned music, newspapers, and contact with others. What else was there to listen to? Still, I decided to follow his instructions. I looked up and listened. There was nothing but the constant roar of the waves, the squawk of seagulls, and the distant hum of airplanes. Familiar sounds. I stepped out of the car. A strong wind slammed the door shut. Was the doctor suggesting I pay attention to these sounds? I climbed a sand dune and listened to the beach's vast emptiness. Sitting there, the roar of the sea drowned out all other sounds. Suddenly, I thought there might be other, softer sounds beneath the roar, the gentle scraping of sand, the whisper of the wind through the wild dunes, if only I listened intently. Compelled, I dove into the sea and swam. Amused by my actions, I ducked under the seaweed. At that moment, I discovered that if you really listen, you can catch moments when everything pauses, waiting. In that silent instant, all thoughts stop and your mind rests. I returned to the car and lay back, continuing to listen intently. As I listened again to the deep roar from the ocean, I thought about the fury of storms that rise within those waves. Then I realized I was thinking of things far greater than myself, and my heart felt at ease with those thoughts. As the morning slowly passed, my habit of throwing myself into problems seemed so ingrained that I felt lost without it. By noon, the sky was clear and the sea sparkled. I opened the second piece of paper. Again, I felt a mix of amusement and irritation. The second dose read, "Try to recall what memories, clearly the beautiful ones from the past. But why, when all my worries were about the present or future?" I left the car and walked along the dunes. The doctor had brought me back to this beach, a place filled with happy childhood memories. Perhaps that's what he wanted me to rediscover, the joys and happiness I had left behind. I decided to revive those faded moments. I would color and sharpen the picture of my past happiness. I would choose specific details and paint them vividly. I would imagine the people in that picture, how they dressed and how they played. I would focus on accurately hearing their voices and laughter. The tide was receding, but the waves still crashed loudly. I chose to return to the last fishing trip I took with my younger brother 20 years ago. He had died in World War II, but I realized that if I closed my eyes and really tried, I could see him vividly, even his mischievous grin and eager eyes. In fact, I saw the whole scene that day. The sparkling sea, the sunrise emerging in the eastern sky, the mighty and slow waves crashing onto the shore. I felt the warm eddies around my knees, my brother's fishing rod suddenly jerking as a fish took the bait, and I heard his joyful shout. I painted that scene piece by piece very clearly, unchanged by the years. Then those images floated away. I stood up slowly, trying to reconnect with my past. Happy people are always confident and assertive. If you leisurely turn back to touch those joyful things, how could you not find some strength? The second phase of the day passed quickly. As the sun began to set, my mind eagerly traveled through the past, reliving moments, discovering people I had completely forgotten. Over the years, I had remembered many events, but had unintentionally let past joys be swept away by time. A warm feeling suddenly surged within me, and then I understood that no act of kindness is ever wasted or loses its meaning. By 3 o'clock, the tide was low, and the sound of the waves was now a whisper. The sea was like a giant breathing. The dunes had become my sanctuary. I felt relaxed, satisfied, and a bit smug. The doctor's doses were easy to take, but I wasn't ready for the third dose. This request was not gentle. It was more like a command. Reevaluate your motives. My first reaction upon reading those words was to defend myself. My motives weren't bad, I reasoned. I wanted to succeed, didn't everyone? I wanted recognition, but so did others. I wanted to be loved, to be safe. Why not? Perhaps a small voice in my head suggested those motives weren't entirely pure. Perhaps that was why I was stuck. I bent down, scooped up a handful of sand, and let it slip through my fingers. In the past, the things I did well came naturally, without premeditation. Recently, however, they had been calculated, carefully planned, but not smoothly executed. Why? Because I had looked beyond the task itself, only thinking of the rewards I hoped it would bring. And the job had stagnated, becoming merely a means to make money. The feeling of giving something, helping others, contributing, had been lost in the rush to seize benefits for myself. Suddenly, I realized that if a person's motives lack purity, everything else is ineffective. Whether you are a mail carrier, a hairstylist, an insurance salesman, a stay-at-home dad, or a homemaker, it makes no difference. Only when you feel you are serving others do you perform well. If you only care about what you will gain, your work's effectiveness decreases. That's the natural law of life. I sat for a long time. Far away, the murmuring wave sounds had turned into a deep rumble as the tide came in. Behind me, the last rays of the day were nearly gone beyond the horizon. My day at the beach was nearly over, and I felt a mix of admiration and envy for the doctor and the doses he had given me. They were so strange yet surprisingly simple. Now, I saw them as valuable doses for anyone facing any difficulty. Listen carefully. To calm and soothe a frantic mind, shift focus from internal concerns to the external world. Try to recall the past, because the human mind can only hold one thought at a time, to erase current worries as you look back to past happiness. Reevaluate your motives. This is the key to treatment. Review. Align a person's motives with their abilities and conscience, and you need to be sincere when doing this. The sun was setting in a blazing red as I took out the last piece of paper. After reading the words written on it, I slowly walked to the sea. Just a few meters from the water's edge, I stopped and read the words again. Write your worries on the sand. I let the paper fly away, picked up a broken seashell, and under the vast sky, I wrote many worries on the sand, one after another. Then I turned and walked away without looking back. I had written my worries on the sand, and out there, the waves were crashing. 29. Lucky Coin. One cold winter morning in 1956, a family was leaving their poor homeland on a train, heading to the unfamiliar city of Brooklyn in the United States. David, a 13-year-old boy, clung to his mother, fearful as the train snaked around bends. They knew challenges lay ahead but remained hopeful for the future. After getting used to the rocking of the train, David pressed his face against the train's window and marveled at the towering skyscrapers and the continuous stream of cars. At that moment, an elderly man greeted him warmly. He sat opposite David, dressed in a thick coat and a fancy fur hat. David watched his friendly gestures, especially his warm eyes and smile. The man asked David's father, "Is this your first time in this country?" David's father nodded in response. The man spoke loudly as if wanting David to hear his conversation with his parents. "In the late 19th century, when I came to America, I was just like this boy," he said, looking at David and continuing. "Then I got on a bus and met an older man. He told me he had also migrated to America as a child, with not a penny to his name. After that, he took out a coin and placed it in my hand, saying, 'This coin has brought luck to my life. Now I pass it to you, hoping it brings you luck as it did to me.' Then the man leaned closer to David, pulled a coin from his pocket, and said, 'This is the coin, my boy. It truly has brought me much luck and success. I want you to have it and wish you all the best in this city.'" He opened David's hand and placed the silver coin in it. David held the coin tightly for a long time. The next day, he examined the coin in the sunlight streaming through the window, squinting to see it better. It was not an ordinary coin. It was minted in the 19th century, but still shiny and new. 40 years later, the once small and frightened immigrant boy had become a successful, happy man. He and his wife raised 4 children who had their own prosperous lives. When he saw his grandchildren living better than he did as a child, he always remembered the lucky coin. David kept the coin with him always. He often shared with his wife. "One day, if I come across a boy who is scared and hiding in his mother's arms in a strange country among unfamiliar people, I will tell him that life ahead can be full of joy and exciting discoveries. That if you believe and give your all, this place can offer a prosperous and successful life." This was the meaning behind the coin and the encouraging words of the unknown old man that had been passed down to the man before him, and now to him. And he would pass it on to another boy someday. 30. Life and embraces. What do you think is the most important part of the human body? Surely everyone's answer will differ. For me, it's the embrace. I was born, grew up, matured, and one day will leave this world, all within embraces. When I was born, I was held in my mother's arms. Despite the pain and exhaustion after childbirth, her arms were still soft and warm. I then grew up in my grandmother's arms, as she sang me to sleep during afternoon naps. Although she was frail, her embrace was always tight to prevent me from waking up startled. I continued to mature in my father's arms. His hands were large, strong, and rough from life's hardships. He often carried me to bed when I fell asleep on a chair or anywhere else in the house. I still remember the comforting feeling of being in his arms as I drifted in and out of sleep. At school, I lived carefree in the embrace of my friends. I often look at a photo of my best friend hugging me under a flamboyant tree, both of us smiling broadly. Friendship is truly warm. As I stepped into the world, I made mistakes and stumbled. The arms of my loved one were always open wide, offering shelter and helping me stand firm against life's storms. Those arms were also where I sought understanding, shared my feelings, and received the warmth of love and happiness in the years that followed. During nights troubled by the passing of a loved one, I often thought about the arms that would hold me when my time comes. However warm those arms might be, they couldn't dispel the coldness of death. At those moments, I longed for a tight embrace. I wanted to be coddled and nestle into the arms of someone I loved and reach out to those who needed my sympathy and support. The happiest people are those who bring happiness to others. I'm not sure if I truly bring happiness when I offer someone an embrace. I may not be sure, but I believe that I've done something good for them. And just that thought alone makes me feel happy. Shoulders provide a place for understanding and comfort, while arms soothe pain and share joy. An embrace can convey messages that sometimes don't need to be spoken. I understand how you feel. I miss you so much, Mom. I'm so glad you're here, Dad. Go ahead and cry out the pain, or you mean the world to me. And when you receive these messages through someone's embrace, remember, you are indeed the luckiest and happiest person. So remember to give and receive embraces, my friend. 31. The Race of Belief. It was a chilly winter evening in 1968 in Mexico City. The clock was nearing 7-10 minutes. Tanzanian athlete John Stephen Arkwari limped through the final meters of the Olympic marathon, his leg bandaged. He was the last to finish that year's race. The winners had already received their medals, and the award ceremony was over. Thus, the stadium was nearly empty when Arkwari, his leg bleeding, struggled to complete his final lap. Only Bud Greenspan, a well-known documentary filmmaker, remained, watching him approach in surprise. Curious, Bud walked up to Arkwari, who was gasping for breath, and asked why he persisted in finishing when the race had long ended and the stands were empty. Breathlessly, John Stephen replied, "I am very happy because I completed the race by giving it my all. My country sent me 9,000 miles not just to start the race, but to finish it." 32. Every day is a gift. My brother-in-law pulled out the bottom drawer of the desk where my sister often worked and retrieved a small package wrapped in tissue paper. He tore off the outer layer to show me a cute pair of silk panties with lace trim, still bearing the original price tag, a considerable amount. John bought them when they first visited New York about 8 or 9 years ago, but she never wore them. She was saving them for a special occasion. Now, there isn't another occasion. He took the panties from my hand, placed them on the bed alongside other clothes we were going to bury with my sister, and caressed them briefly before slamming the drawer shut and turning to me. Don't ever hold back anything for a special occasion. Every day that you're alive is a special occasion. His words echoed in my mind from that moment through the days that followed as I helped him and my niece arrange my sister's funeral. Her departure was so sudden. On the flight home after the funeral, I reflected on his words, my sister's unrealized dreams, and all she did without realizing its specialness. And I realized life is full of sweet flavors to savor whenever possible, not just to cope with. So, I decided to change. I started reading more and worrying less about the trivial things. I enjoyed watching the scenery while sitting on the deck of a ship and didn't fret over the weeds in the garden. I spent more time with family and friends and avoided pointless meetings. I no longer saved anything. I used all my beautiful porcelain and crystal on meaningful occasions, like losing a kilo, unclogging the sink, or the first bloom of a tea rose. I wore my nice clothes to the market if I felt like it. When I think I look elegant, I don't mind paying a bit more for a small bag of vegetables. I won't save my best perfume for any special occasions anymore, no matter what the saleswomen or anyone might whisper. I am eliminating phrases like someday or in a few days from my vocabulary. If something is worth seeing, hearing, or doing, I'll do it now. I'm not sure what my sister would have done if she knew she wouldn't be here the next day, that tomorrow we all take for granted. Perhaps she would have called family and close friends. Maybe she would have met some old friends to apologize and make amends. Or she might have gone out for a Chinese meal. I guess I'll never know. The small undone things would frustrate me if I knew my time was limited. Frustrated because I had put off visiting good friends I was going to contact one day. Frustrated because I hadn't written some letters I intended to write in a few days. I would be upset and regretful for not telling my husband and daughter often enough how much I love them. I'm trying hard not to procrastinate, hold back, or save anything that adds laughter and enriches our lives. And every morning when I wake up, I remind myself, today is a special day. Every day, every minute, every breath is a gift from life. We don't know what might happen to us in this often strange and surprising sequence of life. However, we can decide what happens inside us, how we see things, how we receive them, and what we do with them. And that's really the point. 33. Live so that you can be proud of yourself yesterday. Life is full of things that occupy our minds with thoughts and calculations. The past clings to us with regrets, longing to return once more. The present is restless and tumultuous, pushing us into a cycle of confusion. The future teeters, playfully taunting our doubts about what will come. What will happen and how it will happen remains unknown. Tomorrow may seem close, yet it feels far and elusive. We can't be sure of what fate holds for the next day, but at the very least, each of us can write our own memories for tomorrow. This may seem like a fantasy, something impossible, but living in the present means we are creating memories for tomorrow. If we want to have good memories, we need to live today in a way that makes us proud tomorrow. After all, memories are an important part of life. Respecting memories, creating them, and preserving them means we are honoring our own lives. Life today is full of challenges that we must overcome, often making sacrifices in the hope that today's tears will paint tomorrow's smiles. A tomorrow where we can look back at the past and quietly nod because we lived that way. Live so that you can be proud of yourself yesterday. Youth only knocks once in a lifetime, and later we may desperately wish to shatter the walls of time to recapture every moment of those passionate years. Today, we are surrounded by many relationships, and we aim to gather them all, not just spread them around. Everyone wants to leave a small but beautiful memory in the hearts of others so that when they remember us, they long for a reunion. Because time marches on without looking back or pausing for someone to live those irretrievable moments. The reign of youth, even if it brings a cold, is something everyone should experience at least once. Eventually, we may find someone to marry, have children, and we strive to provide them with a peaceful childhood so that they remember today in the way we hope. After all, we can't bring tomorrow to our children, but we can write beautiful memories into their souls. Writing memories for tomorrow may sound far-fetched and fantastical, but it is actually quite simple. Live so that tomorrow you can be proud of yourself yesterday. 34. The Hen and the Lies. You need to run to the store right now, my mom said. I'm planning to cook chicken tonight, so of course we need a chicken and a few other things. The store is close to our house, so if I have to go, my mom usually sits right outside, waiting for me to come back, and keeps herself busy with her red toy wagon. We live in the mountains, so don't think the store I go to is a supermarket. It's quite small with just one person running it, but it does have a big refrigerator. Mrs. Bradley, the store owner, usually stocks a lot of meat in it, which takes a few days to sell. Our refrigerator at home is tiny, so we have to go to the store every day to buy food. When I got to the store, Mrs. Bradley had run out of chicken meat. So she went to the back of the house and brought out a live hen. She put the hen on the scale and it kept clucking and blinking rapidly. I felt like it was looking right at me, screaming, "Help!" I asked Mrs. Bradley, "What should I do now?" "Just slaughter it and take it home for your mom," she replied casually. That's when my first lie slipped out. "No, that won't do. My mom said not to slaughter it. She wants to buy a live chicken." I swallowed that lie. It was bigger than a chicken egg, and tried to look casual. Mrs. Bradley scrutinized me. "She knows your mom. Your mom doesn't even know how to slaughter a chicken, right?" The next lie came easier. "And my grandma is visiting tomorrow and we'll cook the chicken then. It'll spoil if it's done too soon." Animal compassion. Mrs. Bradley kept that scrutinizing look for a second more, but then she nodded, tied the chicken's legs, and put it in the basket. Then she added a few more things I needed and placed them in the red toy wagon for me to pull home. I hurried home, one hand holding the basket tight and the other pulling the wagon. My mom was sitting at the door waiting. As I got close, she stood up suddenly. "My goodness, what's with Mrs. Bradley today? She must know I don't know how to deal with a live chicken." My mind raced, looking for an answer. But lying is like lighting a firework. Once you light the first one, the rest keep going off. So I said, "It's because it's almost closing time and Mrs. Bradley had something urgent. She didn't have any chickens ready and didn't have time to slaughter this one. She said Dad would help you." My mom started giving me that same scrutinizing look as Mrs. Bradley. I didn't dare look straight at her, so I just bent down and let the chicken go. Mom asked, "Do you think your dad has ever slaughtered a chicken or anything else for that matter?" "If neither you nor Dad can do it, then we'll have to keep it," I rejoiced. "I'll take care of it, Mom." Mom sighed, then went to the kitchen and brought back some corn. "Mrs. Bradley's closed now. Probably can't buy anything else to feed it. We'll just have to make do with this for now." At that moment, I couldn't believe I ended up raising that chicken for the next 8 years. And every time I had to clean the coop, which my dad built, a task I absolutely hated, I comforted myself that it was the price I paid for my lies. And my dad even composed a thank you prayer to recite before meals like this: "Thank you for the food we eat every day, and most of all, thank you for the hen in the backyard who eats much more than we do." 35. Meaningful events. A few years ago, my family adopted a Labrador puppy named Blue. We loved Blue dearly, but with everyone's busy schedules, we couldn't give him the care he deserved. We decided to find a new home where he could be better cared for, even though it was a tough decision. I asked around at church and work for a suitable family. A colleague mentioned that a friend's beloved dog had just passed away, and the family was looking to adopt a new puppy. I knew the family. The husband, Frank, and his wife Donna, a local doctor, were keen on having a dog, and their kids missed their late pet. It seemed like the perfect fit for Blue. I called Donna, who was thrilled to take Blue. We arranged for my husband to bring Blue to their house the next day, Friday. Frank gave us their address, 412 Adams Street, and mentioned he'd be home all day fixing the roof. The next morning, my husband placed Blue in the car. Our farewell was bittersweet, knowing Blue was going to a great family. Donna and Frank lived about an hour away. My husband found the house clearly marked 412 and saw a ladder in the front yard. He walked up to the door with Blue in his arms and knocked. No response. He waited and knocked again. A man from the next yard asked who he was looking for. "Frank," my husband replied. "Oh, he's at the hospital," the man said. "I don't know when he'll be back." My husband was frustrated because Frank had said he would be home. Perhaps he had to take Donna to work, but my husband couldn't wait as he had another appointment. The neighbor offered to keep Blue until Frank returned. His yard was securely fenced, and he was good with his dogs, so my husband left Blue with him and went to his appointment. The following Monday at work, my colleague asked if I'd changed my mind about rehoming Blue because Donna said we hadn't brought him. Surprised, I insisted we had. I called Donna and explained that a neighbor was watching Blue until Frank returned. "But Frank was home all day," Donna said, "and I didn't hear anything from the neighbors." Something strange was happening. It turned out my husband had mistakenly gone to 412 on the next street over. Many people had ladders out for post-storm repairs. Could there also be a Frank at that house? We drove back to find Blue. We reached the correct house this time. A man about 60 with a flushed face answered the door. When we explained we were looking for the puppy we had left last week, he said, "Oh, the puppy that Frank bought?" After clearing up the mix-up and realizing another Frank lived there, his face fell. "The puppy's fine, actually great, but I hope you're not looking to take him back," he said seriously. He explained that the neighbor Frank had suffered a heart attack while gardening and died on Friday. He had decided to wait before bothering Frank's family. Yesterday, he had taken the puppy to their house. When he knocked, Frank's eldest daughter answered. He told her that her father had arranged to buy the puppy, but since he wasn't home, he had kept it. The girl was incredulous. "My dad bought a puppy?" She took the puppy in her arms, buried her face in its fur, and began to cry. I stood there silently. After a moment, she looked up and thanked me. "You don't know what this means to me. I'm so happy to have my dad's dog." The puppy squirmed and tried to lick her face, full of love. Amazed by the story, I told my husband, "We can't take Blue back now." The man nodded in agreement. "Brother, some things are just meant to be. I guess the puppy ended up exactly where it needed to be." 36. My hero. As a teenager, I suddenly realized that I didn't resemble my dad at all. Dad had a head full of thick auburn hair, which stood out, whereas mine was sparse and a dark blonde. His eyes were a sharp shade of blue, while mine were a pale brown. His nose was high and typically Italian, but mine seemed like it had been carelessly molded by an inexperienced sculptor. At 39, Dad's shoulders were broad with muscular arms, unlike my narrow shoulders and thin arms with hands as soft as a girl's. I always wished I had strong hands like his. Years passed, and I became a grown man while Dad aged, but my feelings about him remained the same as when I was a boy, distant and a bit envious. One day, as I stepped out of a grocery store, I was startled when a well-dressed man tapped my shoulder and asked, "Are you Bud Walker's son?" "Yes, I'm his youngest." "I thought so," the man said. "Your dad used to talk about you all the time." For years now, Dad hadn't talked to anyone. Old age and a stroke had taken his ability to communicate. He had a great knack for conversation, and I always wished I could be like him. Currently, Dad was living in a nursing home. With his warm smile and gentle nature, he was beloved by everyone there. But I knew he never talked about me to anyone there. After briefly discussing Dad's health with the stranger, I asked him about his relationship with my dad and how he recognized me, the youngest son. The man was silent for a moment, then replied, "Your dad was one of my heroes." I was shocked to hear what the stranger said. Dad had also been my hero. However, since taking care of him in his unstable condition, I had almost forgotten the image of the smart and strong man he used to be. The man's words jolted me awake. He explained, "I started my career in insurance business, and your father was one of my main business partners. Not only that, he was a respected mentor. He taught me how to serve clients and build trustworthy and understanding relationships. I tried to follow his guidance and succeeded because of it." "But that's not why I consider your dad my hero," the man continued. "One time, our company hosted a conference in Las Vegas and invited major business partners. I had heard about such distant conferences many times but had never participated, so I was very excited. The first night, our group planned to go out to places and do things a married man shouldn't. I wanted to join in with everyone else but didn't want to do those unsavory things. I asked someone, "Is Bud joining us?" The group looked at each other and burst into laughter. The person replied, "Bud is good at everything, but he doesn't know how to relax and have fun like us." Hearing that, I told them, "Then I won't join either." At that moment, I thought if your dad could build a great career and still not lose his values, then I should be able to do the same. "Now, my business is thriving," the man continued. "In 2 months, my wife and I will celebrate our 15th wedding anniversary. Thanks to learning from your dad, I have a happy life today." Though I didn't buy anything I liked that day, I found something far more valuable. It was the image of my dad as a hero, which I had lost long ago. I promised myself I would try to live and act like my hero, even though I looked nothing like him. 37. The Last Runner. The greatest reward for a person's hard work isn't what they get for it, but how they grow as a person through the experience. Every summer, my city hosts an annual marathon. My job is to sit in the ambulance, following the athletes in case anyone needs medical attention. As the race begins, my driver Doug and I are ready in the vehicle, positioned behind hundreds of participants. "We'll be following the last runner, so just drive slowly," I tell Doug as we start moving. "Hope the last one's a fast runner," he jokes. As the crowd picks up speed, the leading group pulls ahead. That's when I spot a woman in blue shorts and a baggy t-shirt lagging behind everyone else. "Doug, look!" We recognize her as the last runner. Her feet seem to clump together while her knees stick out awkwardly. Her legs, affected by some disability, seem barely capable of walking, let alone running. In silence, Doug and I watch her slowly make her way forward, stopping occasionally to let her catch up. Watching her struggle to place one foot in front of the other, I find myself breathless, cheering her on silently. I'm torn between wanting her to stop and hoping she keeps going. Eventually, she's the only one left in our sight. I lean forward in my seat, watching with a mix of anxiety, excitement, and respect as she continues determinedly towards the last few miles. As the finish line comes into view, the cheers from the crowd grow louder. A man stands proudly holding one end of a paper ribbon, the other end tied to a post. She approaches slowly, breaks through the ribbon, and it flutters behind her like wings. I don't know her name, but since that day, she's become a part of my life's memories, a part I rely on heavily. For her, the importance wasn't in beating others or winning a prize. It was about finishing the race, no matter the effort required. Whenever I face a situation that seems too hard, too time-consuming, or just impossible, I think of the last runner. After that, things always seem easier for me. 38. Happiness is all around us. Happiness is simply the absence of unwanted events, and this determines whether happiness exists, not external values. Therefore, by strengthening our spirit, we can easily control all issues related to pain and happiness. Each of us has a great reservoir of happiness, which remains no matter our circumstances. However, because we do not recognize happiness, we continue to suffer needlessly. So, happiness is right here if we recognize it. This is similar to a story told by Buddha in the Lotus Sutra about a poor wanderer who didn't know he carried a priceless gem in his pocket. Once he discovered the gem, he became wealthy and glorious. Like him, we must find ways to recognize our happiness to see how beautiful and meaningful life is. Thus, happiness and suffering are under our control, and we should embrace our happiness. Happiness stems from pain, and pain from physical pleasure. When we indulge in physical pleasures, suffering follows, and this suffering creates the material for happiness. It's like the leaves in the forest, skillfully used by a builder to construct a cozy home of happiness. Therefore, we must be patient and skillful in transforming our sufferings into sources of joy, which makes life beautiful and exciting. When we speak of innate happiness, we also acknowledge the presence of suffering. The discussion here is about ordinary happiness, not eternal bliss. Thus, happiness and suffering coexist. They are perceived from two different perspectives. First, by our life circumstances, and second, by our endless thoughts. We often blame external circumstances, from love to material things, for our happiness or misery. Overthinking can also feel like a disease. For the enlightened, the first type of suffering stems from the second type, but most people think their suffering is due to circumstances. This suffering has a visible form linked to material needs and subjective emotions. It impacts our spirit, causing joy, sadness, love, anger, attachment, and aversion. Even if life is complete, lacking compassion and understanding makes us unhappy. When you close your heart, you miss the simple joys of life. The more material things we have, the more burdened we feel. Thus, most people mistakenly believe that life's suffering comes from circumstances. This is a big mistake, as we often circle in the mud of our own lives. In reality, suffering originates from our spirit. If you can solve your inner difficulties, you can change your external circumstances. But it could be the other way around. Everyone suffers because of money, love, imprisonment, death, fame, and lust. We perceive these needs too greatly, beyond our biological necessities, so we're inevitably stuck in them. This perception leads to greed, anger, delusion, pride, doubt, and false beliefs, causing immense suffering. So, try to recognize that suffering like a disease within your spirit. We must fumble to create our remedy, using suffering as the material. When this remedy works, just keep going. In ordinary life, if we look at our circumstances, we need to study and work, living by societal standards. Through this, we produce material wealth, enabling a fulfilling life with our capabilities. We should also embrace this life as happiness. This doesn't mean you stop striving, but once you have material life secured, spend time for your soul. The happiness from physical desires is fleeting compared to the joy found in the creative love of the spirit. But we must acknowledge that physical desires are also necessary. It's not natural. We struggle all our lives to achieve this. We study and work scientifically, live moderately in harmony with nature, protect our health, and enjoy recreational activities to relax our minds. Don't push yourself into a corner with extreme thoughts. However, we must also strive to recognize the true happiness in life, so we live without regrets. The search for happiness in life is temporary because life is always changing, so we must continuously cope with it. If you only fight with external circumstances, it's not enough for your happiness. You must also fight with your inner self. Facing yourself means confronting your suffering. Why do we suffer? If you can answer this, you know how to transform suffering into happiness. Thus, suffering is due to our misunderstanding of things and our life circumstances. Both are impermanent. Time and objects constantly change, like whirlwinds tearing at our lives, causing despair when they disappear because we thought they were permanent. With this realization, we can't fully understand our endless thoughts. We find it confusing and frightening. This leads to mental illness, making life seem meaningless. Therefore, you must realize that your endless thoughts are the source of happiness and suffering. From there, you can choose attitudes that bring happiness. If you recognize happiness, your life will also be joyful. So, train your spirit to be highly adaptable through life's inevitable tragedies. When you're in the midst of tragedy, let go of your possessive ambitions, and you'll get through. Afterwards, you'll receive the rewards you deserve. But importantly, focus your understanding on people. Then you'll find ways to solve your difficulties. Don't force emotional issues, even if you've tried many material methods to achieve them. Understand that people come together by fate, and when it ends, accept it. This isn't to console you, but to truly understand the nature of the problem. If this makes you suffer, it also makes you grow. But transforming suffering into happiness isn't simple. Given the endless ignorance in our thoughts, in any life situation, you must take time to examine your spirit. If you're struggling, seek a teacher to enlighten you further. Why do we continue to suffer unknowingly? Because we constantly mistake the real and the fake values. If you realize your life is real, everything else is false. Recognizing this, letting go saves your suffering life, not to add disappointment. The issue of presence or absence here is about our will to cling, not about material things. Let go of that clinging, and things will pass, but the material remains. When you let go, you gain freedom, finding life's meaning beyond the allure of material things. When you think genuinely, seeing what's here, you truly live. So, joyfully embrace it in this wondrous present moment. Truly, you must understand something for it to have value to you. The insane suffer immensely because they know nothing. Like a child who chooses a cake over a gold nugget, not knowing its value, it becomes meaningless. And so it is with happiness. If you don't see it within you, you instead experience suffering. Thus, everything has value only when you know how to utilize its full potential. Things have objective value based on how they are used. The same object may have different values to different people, depending on their perception and use. Therefore, if you have a strong spirit that transcends the pull of material, you'll hold your value usage chart for yourself. In today's constantly changing impermanent life, you may find yourself in various situations. But now that you have your value usage chart in hand, use it appropriately for any situation. Thus, in your life, everything you see is beautiful and meaningful. Therefore, you will have the happiness you've always dreamed of. We must recognize that suffering has its value if we know how to use it as material to create happiness. Sometimes, suffering is beautiful and proud, like a flower blooming silently in the dark. Thus, it can transcend ordinary joys because it has a remarkable ability to purify the spirit. True suffering from the heart always has more value than trivial, ordinary joys. So, don't use small, common joys to soothe large sufferings as a frequent, legitimate solution. Instead, view them as supplementary methods to bandage the wound. The main thing is to know to take the right medicine. When the illness is cured, happiness will emerge fragrantly in an area. And at that moment, you have found the priceless gem in your pocket. 39. Don't give up on fate. If I could wish for a life without any obstacles, it would certainly be tempting, but I would decline because then I wouldn't learn anything from life anymore. The early days of 1993 seemed to signal that this wouldn't be a good year for me. It was my 8th year raising 3 school-age children alone, and my oldest daughter, who wasn't married, had just given me my first grandchild. I was also about to break up with a decent man after 2 years of dating. In April that year, I was assigned to interview and write about a woman living in a small town in Minnesota. So, during the Easter season, my 13-year-old son, Andrew, and I drove across 2 states to meet a woman named Jan Turner. During the long drive, I occasionally chatted with Andrew to keep him from dozing off. You know, she lost both her arms and legs. Oh, how does she get around then? We'll find out when we get there. Does she have any kids, Mom? 2 sons, Tyler and Cody, both adopted. What happened to her? I'm not sure. Before losing her limbs, she used to be a music teacher at an elementary school and directed a church choir. Andrew fell asleep again before I could finish telling him the scant details I knew about John. As we entered Minnesota, I wondered how Jan had reacted to the terrible news of losing both her limbs. How could she manage to live? Did she have anyone to help her? When we arrived in Wilmar, Minnesota, I called John from the hotel to ask if I could pick her up with the kids. No need, Pat, I can drive. We'll be there in 10 minutes. Do you want to grab something to eat first? There's a Ponderosa nearby that's pretty good. Sure, that works, I said, though I hesitated, wondering what it would be like to sit in a restaurant with a woman who had no arms or legs. How did she drive? 10 minutes later, John parked in front of the hotel. She got out and walked towards me quite normally on what looked like real legs and extended a prosthetic arm with a shining hook at the end to shake my hand. Hello, Pat. It's great to meet you, and this must be Andrew. I gently squeezed her hand and forced a smile. Yes, this is Andrew. Then I smiled at the 2 boys in the back seat of her car, who were also beaming at me. Jan cheerfully got back behind the wheel. Come on up. Cody, scoot over so Andrew can sit. We went into the restaurant, ate, and talked while the kids chatted among themselves. The only thing I had to do for Jan Turner that evening was to open a jar of tomato sauce. Later, as the kids played in the hotel pool, John and I sat poolside. She told me about her life before the tragedy. I was always busy. Life was so good I was considering adopting a 3rd child. I felt guilty. It turned out this woman was living better than I thought. Jan continued, One Sunday in November 1989, I was playing the trumpet in church when suddenly I felt tired, dizzy, and nauseous. I managed not to collapse during the service, and some young men helped me home. I crawled into bed, but by evening I knew I had to call an ambulance. John said that by the time she was taken to the hospital, she was in a coma. Her blood pressure dropped so low that her body completely shut down. She had pneumonia, a dangerous infectious disease caused by bacteria. One of the side effects was that it triggered the body's clotting system, blocking the blood vessels. Because blood suddenly could not reach her hands and feet, they quickly became necrotic. Just 2 weeks into her hospitalization, her arms were amputated up to the elbows and her legs up to the knees. Right before the surgery, she wept bitterly. Oh God, this can't be happening. How can I live without my arms and legs? Can't walk anymore? Can't play the trumpet, guitar, piano anymore? Will I never be able to hug my kids or take care of them? Please, God, don't make me depend on others for the rest of my life. 6 weeks post-surgery, her wounds healed, and a doctor mentioned prosthetics to Jan. She was told she could learn to walk, drive, go back to school, and even return to teaching. Jan found it hard to believe. In despair, she picked up a Bible and randomly opened it. A verse caught her eye. "Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, His good, pleasing, and perfect will." John thought about becoming new and different and decided to try using prosthetics. With the walking frame strapped up to her elbows and a therapist's help, she could only stagger on her legs for a couple of minutes before collapsing in pain and exhaustion. "Take it slow," John told herself. "Be a new person in actions and thoughts, but one step at a time." The next day she tried on the prosthetic arms, a rough system of cables, rubber bands, and hooks operated by straps over her shoulders. By moving her shoulder muscles, she soon could open and close the hooks to pick up and hold objects as well as dress and eat. Within a few months, John could do nearly everything she used to do, just in a new and different way. However, when I finally got home after 4 months of therapy, I still felt insecure about my life with my kids. But once I got out of the car, walked into the house, and hugged my children tightly, I left all my worries and concerns behind. As Jan and I continued talking, Cody climbed out of the pool, came over, and put his arm around his mother's shoulder. When he heard his mother talk about her new cooking skills, Cody grinned broadly. "My mom's even better than before she got sick because now she makes amazing pancakes." John smiled with the satisfaction of someone who had received a great blessing and was fulfilled in life. After visiting us, John earned a second college degree in communication and became a broadcaster for a local radio station. She also studied theology and now teaches Sunday school at the church in Wilmar where she lives. John simply said, "I'm a new and different person. I've overcome with endless love and wisdom from God." After meeting John, I too became a new and different person. I learned to thank God for everything in life that makes me new. Even though I had to work a part-time job to keep my children in school, learned to be a good grandmother for the first time, and bravely end things with a great friend who wasn't right for me. John may not have arms and legs made of flesh and bone, but she has a heart and soul warmer than anyone I've ever met. She taught me how to embrace everything new and different in life with all my enthusiasm to always feel the joy of a victor. 40. Rubber boots and ice cream cones. When I was young, I loved eating ice cream, a treat I still enjoy to this day. But back then, my desire for ice cream was almost overwhelming. For instance, whenever I saw the ice cream vendor pushing his cart down the street, my mind would spin with excitement, and all I could think about was getting some ice cream right away. My sister Lula was just as crazy about ice cream as I was. We often dreamed that when we grew up, we'd eat ice cream every day, 3 times a day if not 4. However, we rarely got to eat ice cream back then. Our mom was worried it would give us sore throats and colds, so she seldom gave us money to buy any. One day, Lula and I were playing in the garden when Lula found an old, worn-out rubber boot in the bushes. It was so old and tattered that someone must have thrown it away. Lula playfully stuck the boot on the end of a stick and paraded around the garden, waving it overhead. Just then, a junk dealer happened to pass by our street, calling out, "Any rags, bottles for sale." Seeing Lula, he asked, "Hey kid, you selling that boot?" Thinking he was joking, Lula replied, "I am selling it. It's exactly 100 rubles. The junk dealer laughed and said, 100 rubles is too much, little lady. but I can give you 2 kopecks and we can part as friends." He then pulled 2 kopecks out of his wallet, handed them to Lula, stuffed our battered boot into his sack, and moved on. Lula and I realized this was an actual transaction, not just play. The junk dealer had long gone, but we stood there marveling at the coins in our hands. Right then, the ice cream vendor came by, shouting, "Who wants strawberry ice cream?" We rushed over and bought 2 1-kopek ice cream cones. We devoured them quickly and immediately regretted selling the boot for so little. The next day, Lula said to me, "Minka, today I plan to sell another rubber boot to the junk dealer." Excited, I asked, "Lula, did you find another boot in the bushes?" Lula replied, "There aren't any more boots in the bushes, but in the front hall of our house there are plenty of boots, at least 15. If we sell just one, it shouldn't be a problem." She ran inside and brought out a nearly new, high-quality boot. Lula said, "If yesterday the junk dealer bought an old boot for 2 kopecks, he would surely pay at least 1 ruble for this nearly new one. With that money, we could buy lots of ice cream." We waited for the junk dealer for an hour. When he finally appeared, Lula told me, "Minka, today it's your turn to sell the boot. You're the man, so you should talk to the junk dealer. Otherwise, he might give you only 2 kopecks like yesterday, and that's too little for us." I put the boot on a stick and waved it around. As the junk dealer approached our garden, he asked, "Are you selling another boot?" I shyly responded, "Yes, sir." "Too bad you only have 1 boot to sell. I can only offer 5 kopecks for one. If you had a pair, I could give you 20 or even 30 kopecks. People need a pair of boots. A pair brings a higher price." Lula quickly told me, "Minka, run inside and get another boot." I dashed inside and soon came out with a large boot. The junk dealer placed the 2 boots side by side and sighed sadly, "You kids disappoint me. One is a woman's boot and the other a man's. What am I supposed to do with these? I was going to offer 5 kopecks for one, but seeing them together, it's just too bad. All right, take 4 kopecks and we'll part as friends." Lula was about to go inside for another boot when our mother called. Her guests were leaving, so she called us in to say goodbye. Noticing our confusion, the junk dealer said, "I was going to give you 4 kopecks, but now I must deduct one because I've wasted my time talking to children." He handed Lula 3 1-kopek coins, stashed the boots into his bag, and left. Lula and I immediately ran into the house to say goodbye to our mom's friends, Miss Olia and Mr. Kalia, who were in the front hall putting on their coats. Suddenly, Miss Olia exclaimed, "How strange! One of my boots is here under the coat rack, but where's the other?" Lula and I turned pale. We stood still, not daring to move. Miss Olia said, "I clearly remember coming here with both boots, but now one is missing?" Mr. Kalia was also looking for his boot and said, "What's this trickery? I remember coming with both boots, but now one is gone?" Hearing this, Lula was so frightened that she accidentally dropped the coins, which clinked on the floor. Our dad came out to see the guests off and saw the coins. "Lula, where did you get the money?" Lula started to make up a story, but Dad said, "Nothing is worse than lying." Lula burst into tears. I cried too. And we both said, "We sold 2 boots to the junk dealer to buy ice cream." Hearing that her boot had been sold, Miss Olia turned pale and swelled with anger. Mr. Kalia was stunned and clasped his chest. But Dad told them, "Don't worry, I know how to get you boots. I will sell all of Lula and Minka's toys to the junk dealer, and with that money, I will buy you another pair of boots." Hearing this, Lula and I cried louder. Dad continued, "But that's not all. For the next 2 years, I forbid Lula and Minka from eating ice cream. After 2 years, you may have ice cream again, but each time, remember today's sad events and think about whether you deserve that sweet treat." That very day, Dad called the junk dealer back to sell all our toys and used the money to buy boots for Miss Olia and Mr. Kalaya. Dear children, many years have passed since then. For the first 2 years, indeed, Lula and I didn't eat a single ice cream cone. After that, each time we ate ice cream, we inevitably remembered what had happened. Children, even now, as I am an adult and even quite old, whenever I eat ice cream, I still feel a lump in my throat and feel uncomfortable. And every time I eat ice cream out of habit from my childhood, I ask myself, do I deserve this ice cream? Have I lied or done something harmful to others? Nowadays, dear children, people eat a lot of ice cream because our country has many large ice cream factories. Thousands, even millions of people enjoy ice cream. Dear children, I just wish that whenever anyone eats ice cream, they would think about what I always think about whenever I enjoy this treat. 41. Unbreakable Spirit. The Journey of Jan Turner. One of the most empowering things you can do is to define yourself, know who you are, believe in what you stand for, and understand where you want to go. Sheila Murray Bethel, Joan Malinsky always dreamt of being on stage to bring joy and relaxation to people. Although she had some success in local talent shows, her parents were skeptical about her choice to pursue a career in stand-up comedy. Her first performance in New York was at the end of summer in a club, and her parents attended. The act began with a funny song, but the audience paid her as much attention as they did to a dessert cart passing by their table. Amidst 300 people chatting away, barely anyone noticed the artist on stage. Feeling embarrassed and hurt, Joan persevered, finishing her performance with a meek "thank you" before running off to the kitchen in tears. Her parents were embarrassed, but mostly for themselves more than for their daughter. This failure made Joan's father, Dr. Malinsky, even more adamant that she should give up her entertainment dreams for a more practical profession. "But this is my life, and I'm going to live it to the fullest," Joan stubbornly insisted. The argument ended with Joan leaving her family to move to New York City. She rented a place, scraped by, and nurtured her dream by performing in variety shows. Her dedication slowly paid off, and she eventually landed a job as a scriptwriter and performer for Candid Camera, a lesser-known show in California. Despite her efforts, the show's producer, Alan Funt, never remembered her name correctly, calling her anything from Jerry to Jeannie to Jackie. One day, she received a call from The Tonight Show where she had applied for a small role. They wanted her to appear alongside Johnny Carson, a leading comedian of the time. Claiming to be sick to take a day off from Candid Camera, Joan seized this opportunity. On stage, she and Carson clicked immediately, even outperforming the script. At the end of the show, Carson excitedly proclaimed to millions of viewers, "Wow, she's hilarious! Watch, she's going to be a star!" The next day, Joan received numerous performance offers from across the country, catapulting her into the list of top-tier comedians. Eventually, she quit Candid Camera, leaving Alan Funt both angry and regretful. Chewing on a carrot, he said, "I think you've made a huge mistake, Jill." That was the last time she was called by the wrong name. From then on, Joan Malinsky was always addressed correctly. Far off at the horizon were my dreams and aspirations. I might never reach them, but I can look up and admire their beauty, believe in them, and try to pursue them. Louisa May. Alcott. Never surrender to fate. If I could wish for a life without any obstacles, it would certainly be appealing, but I would decline because then I wouldn't learn anything from life. Allison Jones. The beginning of 1993 seemed to indicate that it wasn't going to be a good year for me. It was the 8th year I was raising 3 school-age children on my own. My eldest daughter had just given birth to my first grandchild without being married. and I was about to break up with a decent man after 2 years of dating. In April of that year, I was called to interview and write about a woman living in a small town in Minnesota. So during the Easter season, my 13-year-old son, Andrew, and I drove across 2 states to meet a woman named Jan Turner. During the long drive, I occasionally engaged Andrew to keep him from dozing off. You know, she lost both her arms and legs. Oh, how does she get around then? We'll see when we get there. Does she have any kids, Mom? 2 sons, both adopted. Their names are Tyler and Coily. What happened to her? I'm not sure. Before losing her limbs, she was a music teacher at an elementary school and led a church choir. Andrew fell asleep before I could finish telling him the little I knew about Jan. As we reached Minnesota, I wondered how she had coped with the devastating news of losing her limbs. How could she manage to live? Was anyone there to help her? When we arrived in Wilmar, Minnesota, I called John from the hotel to ask if I should pick her up with the kids. No need, Pat, I can drive. We'll be there in 10 minutes. Would you like to grab something to eat first? There's a Ponderosa nearby that's pretty good. Sure, that sounds fine, I said, feeling a bit awkward. How would sitting in a restaurant with a woman without limbs be like? How could she drive? 10 minutes later, John parked in front of the hotel. She got out of the car and walked towards me on very realistic-looking legs and extended her right arm, which ended in a shiny hook to shake my hand. Hello, Pat. Nice to meet you. This must be Andrew. I gently squeezed her hand and forced a smile. Yes, this is Andrew. Then, I turned to smile at the 2 boys in the back seat of her car, who were also beaming at me. Jan happily settled back behind the wheel. Come on, Coily, scoot over so your friend Andrew can sit. We went to the restaurant, ate, and chatted while the kids talked among themselves. The only thing I had to help John with all evening was opening a bottle of ketchup. Later, while the kids played in the hotel pool, John and I sat by the poolside. She told me about her life before the tragedy. Back then, I was so busy. Life was so beautiful that I thought about adopting a 3rd child. I felt a pang of conscience. I had to admit that this woman was living a better life than I had imagined. John continued. One Sunday in November 1989, I was playing the trumpet in church when suddenly I felt tired, dizzy, and nauseous. I managed not to collapse during the service, and 2 young men took me home afterwards. I went to bed to rest, but by evening I felt I needed to call an emergency. Jan said that by the time she was taken to the hospital, she was in a coma. Her blood pressure had dropped so low that her body was completely paralyzed. She developed pneumonia, a severe infectious disease caused by bacteria. One of the side effects of this disease is the activation of the body's clotting system, which blocked her blood vessels. Because the blood suddenly couldn't reach her hands and feet, they quickly necrosed. Within 2 weeks of being hospitalized, John's arms were amputated up to her elbows and her legs up to her knees. Just before the surgery, she cried bitterly. Oh God, this can't be happening. How can I live without my arms and legs, can't walk anymore, can't play trumpet, guitar, piano anymore? Will I never be able to hug my children or take care of them again? Please God, don't make me dependent on others for the rest of my life. 6 weeks after the surgery, when the wounds had healed, a doctor mentioned prosthetics to John. He said she could learn to walk, drive, go to school, and even teach again. John found that hard to believe. In a moment of despair, she picked up the Bible and randomly opened it. A verse caught her eye. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, His good, pleasing, and perfect will. John thought about that, about becoming a new and different person, and decided to try using prosthetic limbs. With a walking frame strapped to her forearms and a physical therapist's help, She could only stagger a few steps before falling down in pain and exhaustion. Take it slow, John told herself. Be a new person from actions to thoughts, but do it one step at a time. The next day, she tried on prosthetic arms, a crude system of cables, rubber bands, and hooks operated by straps over her shoulders. By moving her shoulder muscles, she soon could open and close the hooks to pick up and hold objects, as well as dress and eat. Within a few months, John could do almost everything she had done before, just in a new and different way. However, when I finally came home after 4 months of therapy, I still felt insecure about my life with my children. But once I got out of the car, walked into the house, and hugged my children, I let go of all my worries and sorrows. As John and I continued our conversation, Coily climbed out of the pool, came over and put his arm around his mother's shoulder. When he heard his mother talk about her recent progress in cooking, he grinned widely. My mom is even better than before she got sick because now she makes delicious pancakes. John laughed joyfully, as if she had been granted a great happiness and satisfaction in life. After our visit, John earned a second college degree in communications and became a broadcaster for a local radio station. She also studied theology and now teaches catechism at her church in Wilmar. John simply said, "I am a new and different person. I have triumphed thanks to God's endless love and wisdom." After meeting John, I too became a new and different person. I learned to thank God for everything in life that makes me new, even though I had to work an additional part-time job to keep my kids in school, learn how to be a good grandmother for the first time, and have the courage to end things with a wonderful friend who just wasn't right for me. John may not have arms and legs of flesh and bone, but she has a heart and soul that burn hotter than anyone I've ever met. She taught me how to embrace everything new and different that comes into my life with all my passion, to always feel the joy of a victor. 42. Mom, our little house has always been marked by constant poverty and hunger, but it seems like hardship refuses to let us go. Just as I started bringing books to school, we faced a great loss when Dad passed away due to a severe illness. You and I had to bury him ourselves. As a widow, you decided not to remarry. You knew you were now the only support for your son. You tirelessly worked our small piece of land, the most valuable asset we had. Over the years, the walls of our home were filled with my school awards. Watching me grow up, diligent and successful, brought tears to your cheeks. After finishing middle school, I was admitted to one of the city's top high schools. But as soon as the acceptance letter arrived, you fell ill. The disease paralyzed your lower body. As the main laborer in our family, you could no longer work the fields or walk as before. Understanding your struggles, I wanted to quit school. Mom, I'll stop going to school and work the land instead. How can we afford the tuition and living expenses, not to mention the monthly 15 kilos of rice? You must not quit school no matter what, you insisted. You are my pride. Just focus on your studies and don't worry about the rest. We argued for a long time. I was stubborn, not wanting to see you suffer. It wasn't until you lost your temper and slapped me for the first time in my 16 years that I was stunned into silence. You collapsed to the ground and wept bitterly. Following your wishes, I packed and went to school, heavy-hearted. You stood silently for a long time, watching as I disappeared into the distance. Later, you, limping and uneven, brought a sack of rice to the school. You were the last to arrive. After setting down the heavy sack, you approached the administrative office breathlessly. "Please weigh it," said the school administrator as he inspected the mix of low-quality and mixed grains. "I don't understand why parents buy such poor-quality rice for their children." With a donation of 50,000 dong, You asked if it could help cover some of my expenses, but he declined and suggested you keep the money for yourself. As months passed, each time you delivered rice, it was met with criticism for its quality. Frustrated and unable to change our situation, you were finally told to take the rice back home. Unable to bear the humiliation and feeling utterly powerless, you broke down in tears. Revealing your struggles, you explained that the rice was collected from begging around different neighborhoods, as your disability prevented you from working the fields. You were determined not to let me drop out of school, believing education was the only way out of poverty. Touched by your determination, the school administrator decided to help. He would inform the school of our situation, ensuring I would receive a scholarship for students overcoming hardship. At my high school graduation, when my achievements were celebrated, you stood in a corner, smiling proudly. Unbeknownst to all, 3 sacks of mixed rice were displayed on stage. The principal shared your incredible story, moving everyone present. He explained that these grains, gathered through your sweat and love, were priceless. As you walked up on stage, helped by the administrator, I was overwhelmed. I had never imagined the extent of your sacrifice. Mom, you are my hero. 43. The value of a rock. A student often asked his teacher, "What is the value of life?" One day, the teacher handed the student a rock and instructed, "Take this rock to the market, but don't sell it. Just see how much people offer for it." "Why should I do that?" the student asked, puzzled. The teacher smiled and replied, "If you want to understand the value of life, just do as I say." Following his teacher's advice, the student took the rock to the market. People were confused as to why he would try to sell such an ugly rock. After sitting all day, a sympathetic vendor came up and offered $1 for it. Remembering his teacher's instruction not to sell, the student took the rock back and reported, "Nobody really wanted it, but luckily someone offered $1." The teacher smiled and said, "Good. Tomorrow take the rock to a jewelry store, but remember, even if the store owner wants to buy it, don't sell it." The next day, the student took the rock to the jewelry store. To his surprise, the store owner offered him $500. Shocked by the high offer from previously having none, he still did not sell it and took the rock back as instructed. The student eagerly asked why it was so. The teacher smiled and said, "Tomorrow, take it to an antique shop, but do not sell it. Just ask for the price." Following the teacher's advice, the student took the rock to the antique shop the next day. After some examination, he was astounded when the owner offered to trade all his possessions for it. Still, the student did not sell the rock and quickly returned to tell his teacher. Then, the teacher explained slowly, "The rock is actually a priceless antique, worth a fortune, and so is the value of life. To some, it might seem worthless, and to others, it's worth a fortune. The rock remains the same, as does life. The only difference is our understanding and how we view it." We often question the value of everything around us, from inanimate objects to our jobs, the people around us, and even our own lives. This story is a metaphor showing that often the value of something is hidden beyond what our eyes can see. The value of something should not be hastily judged or concluded without placing it in different contexts and perspectives. And the value of life for each person is a different choice. Everyone has their own way of pricing success or happiness. We should respect everyone's choices and make our lives valuable in our own way. 44. Mom, I'm talking to you. We all know that dread of receiving a call in the middle of the night. That night, I was nearly startled awake by the ringing phone. My sleepy brain flooded with thoughts of what could be wrong as I answered, "Hello?" My heart pounded and my grip tightened on the phone as I glanced at my husband, who had just opened his eyes. "Is that you, Mom?" I could barely hear the whisper on the other line, but my thoughts immediately turned to my daughter. As the desperate, sobbing voice of my young daughter became clearer, I grabbed my husband's hand tightly. "Mom, I know it's really late, but please, just let me talk first. I know you'll ask, yes, I've been drinking." I drove off the main road for a few miles and I took a deep breath, let go of my husband's hand, and pressed my forehead. I was still not fully awake. I tried to focus, to fight off the panic. Something wasn't right. "And I'm so scared. I keep thinking you'd be heartbroken to hear I had died. Mom, I want to come home. I know I was wrong to leave. I know how worried you've been about me. I should have called you days ago, but I was afraid. I was so scared, Mom." The sound of her crying poured through the phone and into my heart. Suddenly, I could vividly picture my daughter's face, and my mind snapped alert. "I think—" Don't be mad, Mom. Please let me finish." Her voice was urgent, desperate. I paused and tried to think of what to say. Before I could continue, she spoke again. "I'm pregnant, Mom. I shouldn't have drunk so much, especially now, but I was scared, Mom. I was so scared." Her voice stopped, and I bit my lip. Tears filled my eyes. My husband whispered, "Who is it?" I shook my head. He left the room and seconds later was on the phone in the living room. My daughter must have heard the clicking on the line and continued, "Mom, you're still listening, right? Please don't hang up. I need you. I'm so lonely." I gripped the phone tighter and looked at my husband for support. "No, I'm listening. I won't hang up," I replied. "I know I should have told you, but whenever we talk, you always tell me what I should do. I've read the advice in the books you bought me, but you still keep talking. What I need is for you to listen to me. You never let me express what I think and feel. It's like you think my feelings don't matter because you have all the answers. But sometimes I don't need answers. I just need someone to listen." I suddenly felt a lump in my throat as I glanced at the parenting book tossed aside on the table. "I'm listening now. Go ahead," I whispered. "You know," she continued. I turned the car back onto the main road after I sobered up. I started thinking about the baby and felt responsible to take care of it. Then I saw a public phone booth and remembered what you always lecture about drinking and driving. So I called a cab. "I want to come home." "Good for you, sweetheart," I said, feeling my heart slowed down. My husband moved closer, sat next to me, and took my hand. I knew then that I had done the right thing. "But Mom, I think I can still drive home." "Don't, dear," I suddenly snapped. My body tensed and I squeezed my husband's hand. "Please, just wait a little longer. Don't hang up until the taxi arrives, okay? Mom, I just want to get home quickly. I understand. But please do as I say. Just wait for the taxi, okay?" I listened to the silence, fear rising in me. When there was no sound on the other line, I bit my lip and closed my eyes. I had to prevent her from driving home. Only when I heard the taxi driver's voice on the other end did I feel relieved. "The taxi's here. I'm going home now, Mom." There was a click and the phone went silent. Leaving the bed with tears still on my cheeks, I walked to my 16-year-old daughter's room and stood there. The night was utterly quiet. My husband stepped up behind me. He looked at me and then asked, "Do you think that girl earlier realized she dialed the wrong number?" I looked at my sleeping daughter and softly said, "No, probably not." I was moved by emotion. How many times had I not listened? It wasn't too late. I realized that no book could teach us how to listen to others and empathize with their struggles and pain. Sometimes just listening can not only heal wounds but also save a life. 45. Unemployed Dad. I received that call late on a Friday afternoon. My boss, sounding cryptic on the phone, told me to meet him at the airport Monday morning. Although he often flew to my region to check on our stores and meet with me, this time I felt a sense of dread. Typically, these visits were planned weeks in advance and involved multiple locations. So, this sudden trip felt off, and I sensed something bad was about to happen. In my 9 years with the company, I had seen many colleagues abruptly leave. I was using the company's car, computer, and phone. There was no reason for them to risk these assets just for the sake of it. Whether you call it downsizing, firing, layoff, or dismissal, it all meant the same. In just 48 hours, I would lose a job I had dedicated 9 years to, a job I had sacrificed so much for to provide for my family. I pulled over to the side of the road and sat there, paralyzed. I wanted to cry. I wanted to scream. I wanted to call my boss and plead for my job. And I wondered how I would break it to Amber, my wife, who had just given birth to our first child 3 months ago. That weekend was horrible. I couldn't sleep or eat. My stomach was in knots. Amber and I stayed up late planning our next steps. We didn't have much savings, and we lived in a city known for scarce job opportunities. I was genuinely terrified. During those late-night talks, Amber gave me great advice. It not only helped me get through the darkest days, but also turned the worst things that happened to us into unimaginable opportunities. Keep your head up, be proud of what you've accomplished, and move forward with your dignity intact, she advised. There must be a reason for this, and someday you'll understand why. On Monday, I woke up early and dressed in a crisp white shirt and tie. I organized my documents, name tag, spare car keys, and other items into a large envelope. Arriving early at the airport, Amber and our daughter came along for moral support and to drive me back if I had to return the car. There I saw my boss approaching. My heart tightened as I got up from the seat. My legs shook as I followed him to a table in the corner. I hardly remember what he said, but once the verdict was delivered, everything went by procedure. I handed over everything that belonged to the company, shook his hand, and thanked him for the opportunity to work there over the years. As I turned the corner to where my wife and daughter waited in the car, tears started to flow. For the first time since I was 13, I was unemployed. The following week was a blur of confusion. Amber, a teacher, was off for the summer, so while she stayed home with Zoe, I would go to afternoon movies, clueless about what to do while everyone else was at work. I tried to focus on the screen, hoping to distract myself from the pain gnawing at me. Although I was not the smartest, most handsome, or most talented, I had always been the hardest working. Without that defense, I felt completely lost. With not enough money to send Zoe to daycare, I took on the role of caring for her every day at home. Soon, Amber had to return to school, and I transitioned from a regional business specialist managing 20 employees and millions in annual revenue to a stay-at-home dad changing diapers, washing bottles, and rocking a baby to sleep. Day by day, week by week, my grief lessened, and I realized that, like it or not, I had a duty to care for my child as best I could. The problem was, I had no idea what to do with a baby. I had never had children before, nor had I ever spent so much time with one. I decided to do the only thing I knew, care for Zoe while figuring out how to be a good parent. Before long, Zoe and I became close friends. We would drive to the lake, become regulars at local bookstores, and attend book readings and signings there. Occasionally, she would doze off, and I would read the newspaper while watching her, but most of the time she was by my side and we were inseparable. Zoe became my lunch buddy, my confidant, and my best friend. More importantly, I became a real father. I was there for her first words, her first solid foods, her first steps. It was magical. I learned her different moods, her complex personality, and after 4 years, we had a bond that nothing could break. Despite losing the corporate perks and financial security, my life felt unchanged. The darkness and despair that had financially challenged us the most had transformed me into a new person. No job in the world was worth missing time with Zoe. With this new perspective, I finally gathered the courage to change careers and pursue my dreams. Now I'm back at work doing what I love and always wanted to do. Although the pay is never what it once was, I feel more fulfilled, and the bond with my daughter is something no amount of money can buy. 46. The Flame of Love. My parents divorced when I was 9 years old, and that same year I fell ill with a mysterious condition. Suddenly my knees swelled up and I was in so much pain that I couldn't walk. I was admitted to the hospital, where doctors tried many advanced techniques to diagnose and treat me, but nothing worked. They suggested that my illness might be related to psychological factors. So I was not only under the care of many specialists but also psychologists every day. After the divorce, my parents lived in different towns, so they rarely saw each other. When I suddenly became sick, they were both very worried and stayed by my side in the hospital, united in taking care of me. At first, when I was hospitalized, my mom stayed with me all day. However, she would leave as soon as my dad came for his night shift, as it seemed they didn't want to see each other. A few weeks later, she started to linger a bit when my dad arrived, and eventually they even started smiling at each other, although it was a bit awkward at first. Because their shifts overlapped, they occasionally had to communicate about my care. Sometimes, when the doctors had news or requests, my mom wanted my dad to be there too. Often she would start crying and my dad would comfort her. This gave me hope that maybe they would get back together. After 3 months in the hospital, there was no improvement in my condition, and the doctors said I would never walk again. Despite the grim prognosis, I found a ray of hope knowing that my parents still loved each other. The time spent together taking care of me helped them understand and empathize with each other again. They decided to get back together to take care of the small family they had unintentionally neglected. This gave me new strength, and even though I couldn't walk, I felt happy. 6 months after my parents reunited, I started moving my legs and taking small steps. Since then, I have been able to walk normally without any difficulties, except for occasional pain in my knees. The doctors couldn't find the cause of my illness, and now they can't explain why I recovered. But I know the reason. My parents reunited, and our family is happy again. Their love was the special medicine that allowed me to walk normally. The flame of love from my parents gave me the strength to heal my emotional wounds. So, my friends, life is full of miraculous events that science can't always explain. The power of love is truly incredible, isn't it? Let's keep igniting more flames of love every day and share it with our family, friends, and teachers so that miracles continue to exist in our lives. 47. A Noble Promise. They met by chance in a hospital while taking a walk, both at the age of 17. In just one look, their young hearts felt a deep connection. They saw in each other's eyes a shared compassion. From that day on, they were no longer alone. One day they both received news that their illnesses were incurable. Before being taken home by their families, they spent an evening together, promising to overcome their fate together. They vowed to write 2 letters each week to encourage and support one another. The next day, they parted ways. 3 months quickly passed. The girl grew weaker. One day, holding a letter from the boy, she peacefully closed her eyes with a content smile. Her mother, in panic, called out to her, but the girl had passed away. The mother read the letter in her hand. When fate plays with your life, don't be scared because I am with you, and so are others who care. I am getting stronger, and I will be with you soon. You won't be alone. The next day, the mother discovered dozens of letters written by her daughter, ready to be mailed. On top was a note to her mother. "Mom, these are the letters I wrote for a boy I promised to journey through life with. But as I quickly grew weaker, I was afraid I couldn't keep that promise. I've prepared these letters. Please send one each week to him. so he thinks I am still alive and encouraging him to fight his illness. I just hope he has enough faith to keep living. Your daughter. Following the address on the envelopes, the mother went to the boy's house. There, she saw a photo of a vibrant young man framed with a black ribbon. Surprised, she learned that the boy had passed away a month ago. The boy's mother tearfully pointed to a stack of letters next to his picture, explaining, "My son wrote these in his last days, asking me to mail one each week to some girl he said was waiting for his encouragement. I've been sending these out for a month, not knowing if she ever received them." The girl's mother rushed to embrace the boy's mother, both crying silently. Once they understood everything, they decided to keep sending the letters they had left each week, fulfilling a noble promise. 48. The Lonely Gem. For ages, emerald has been adored by many for its captivating allure to women and sophistication for those who possess it. However, emerald itself doesn't feel that way. It's self-conscious for not possessing the glamour of rubies or the delicacy of pearls. Moreover, it feels that few can wear it to important events due to its selective color matching with outfits and body types. Day by day, its self-esteem diminishes, until one day it's truly forgotten as it loses its shine, becoming just like any other colored stone. A simple stone without any outstanding features, slowly being discarded and tossed into a stream to live the life of a pebble, quiet and lonely. Then one day, a dashing young man stumbles upon the small stream where emerald resides. Suddenly he stops, sits by the stream, lost in thought, and begins to confide in himself. It's a romantic tale of him and a beautiful princess, intelligent and with a heart of gold. Word spreads, and the prince from the neighboring kingdom embarks on a journey to find her. He falls in love with her at first sight, but the princess refuses his proposal because she's waiting for the person who will bring her a birthday gift as foretold by the head fairy. He will be the princess's husband because he will bring her a gift that brings mystical beauty and elegance of the highest order. It brings a bit of mystery and power to those who possess it. It's a gem with a unique color that only exists in legends, a gem that brings happiness. The princess's 18th birthday approaches, and she's waited too long for that someone. She can't abandon her hope at the last moment, but she also loves the prince deeply. What to do? Eventually, the princess falls seriously ill with no cure in sight. She lies bedridden and unconscious for weeks. The prince is heartbroken to see her fading day by day. Finally, he decides to go in search of that gem because only that gem can bring happiness to the princess, even though he knows that once he finds it, the princess will marry someone else and he'll lose her. But there's no other way. He'd rather sacrifice himself than see the princess perish. So, he sets out, traveling far and wide, yet unable to find the elusive gem. Eventually, exhausted, fate leads him to this small stream. Listening to this touching tale, the gem suddenly sheds tears. Gems have spirits too, and it weeps. How long it weeps, nobody knows, but its tears wash away the moss that had clung to its surface, revealing its intricate patterns beneath. Under the clear, cool water, its beauty shines brighter and purer than ever before. Suddenly, the prince notices it, astonished to see a gem with such a peculiar color. He steps into the stream, approaches it, picks it up, admires it, and realizes that it's the gem the princess has been waiting for. Immediately, he takes it back to the capital, entrusting it to the finest jeweler for polishing. Enduring days of pain, finally, emerald returns to its former self, nearly perfect in beauty. The prince presents it to the princess. Gently, as the princess opens her eyes on her birthday, she sees the gem before her, smiling at the prince's heartfelt gesture. She recovers. A week later, the two hold a splendid and dignified wedding. The princess wears no jewelry except for a ring adorned with an emerald. Emerald is proud because it's the most cherished treasure, valued by the princess. At the most crucial moment, the fairy godmother appears, blessing the princess with happiness. Then she places her hand on the emerald and says, "Time doesn't make people forget you, Emerald. You're forgotten because you didn't try to shine on your own. Do you know you're a creation of the Most High? Nothing the Most High creates is worthless. You're too self-conscious, and that's why you fail to see the beauty within yourself. Perhaps to this person you might mean nothing, but to others you have great significance. And the truth has proven that." With that, the fairy disappears, but Emerald ponders deeply. From then on, Emerald always shines with its unique beauty, unmatched by any other gem, and it has been cherished ever since. The most beautiful life is when we're true to ourselves and learn to love and appreciate ourselves. Each person is born with a unique purpose. Otherwise, why would the world need so many people like us? 49. Blank pages. One late afternoon, as the last glimmers of sunset faded, a young woman walked alone on the deserted beach, barefoot. She stopped to look back at the footprints she left in the sand, but the waves had washed them away. As she turned to continue walking, she was startled by what she saw ahead, an old woman sitting by a fire wrapped in a blanket, slowly turning the pages of a book. The young woman gathered her courage, approached the old lady and asked, "Where did you come from? I didn't see you just a moment ago. How did you start this fire so quickly?" The old woman replied slowly and clearly, not directly answering the young woman's questions. "Sit down with me, my dear. I have something to show you." Sitting by the fire, the young woman took the book from the mysterious old lady. Curiously flipping through it, she was shocked to find it written about her life, detailing everything from her birth up to that very moment, including their strange meeting by the fire on the empty beach. She turned the page only to find it blank. Frantically searching through the remaining pages, she found them all blank. In a panic, she looked at the old woman. "Does this mean my life ends here, right now?" "No, my dear. It means that from tonight, your life truly begins." The old woman then took back the book and began tearing the pages from the beginning, those that detailed the young woman's life, and tossed them into the fire, letting them burn to ash. She burned all the written pages that the young woman had read. Finally, she handed back the remaining part of the book, filled with blank pages. "See, the waves have erased your footprints from the sand. Your past will never return, never. Only the present is real. Every moment now is a beginning of your life and is yours to embrace. There's no turning back, not even for a second. More importantly, each new day brings you a chance to love, to live, and that opportunity never repeats. Your future is yours to shape according to your dreams. On these blank pages, you are the one who will write the next chapters of your life." Then, as suddenly as she had appeared, the old woman and the fire vanished into the night. Our lives, like that of the young woman, and indeed everyone's, are like what we write on sand, washed away by the waves. The future is what we will write on blank pages, starting now, in this very moment. What will you write for your own life? 50. A midnight call. Just 100 more steps to success. Back when I was 25, I was unemployed and hungry. This wasn't new to me, as I had faced similar times in Constantinople, Paris, and Rome. But in New York, even the air seemed filled with success, making unemployment even more embarrassing. I was clueless about what to do, which was not unusual. I wanted to earn a living through writing, but I couldn't write in English, so I spent my days wandering the streets to keep out of my landlord's way. One day on 42nd Street, I bumped into a large man with fiery red hair. I recognized him immediately, Fyodor Chaliapin, the famous Russian actor. As a teenager, I often lined up to buy the cheapest tickets to hear him sing at the Moscow Empire Theater. When I was a journalist in Paris, I had interviewed him once. I thought he wouldn't remember me, but he did. He asked me, "Are you busy?" I mumbled a vague reply. He probably guessed my situation. "Come with me to the hotel at the corner of Broadway and 103rd Street. We'll walk there." It was midday, and I had already been wandering for 5 hours. "But Mr. Chaliapin, that's 3 or 4 miles away." He interrupted me. "Nonsense, it's less than 100 yards. I asked, surprised, 100 yards? "Yes, that's right. I don't mean to the hotel, of course. I mean to the shooting range on 6th Avenue. I didn't understand, but I followed him anyway. Soon, we reached the shooting range, watching 2 sailors shooting targets repeatedly. Then we continued walking. Mr. Chaliapin cheerfully told me, "Now it's just over half a mile." I nodded. A bit later, we reached Carnegie Hall. Mr. Chaliapin liked to watch people's faces as they bought concert tickets. We stopped for a few minutes, then kept walking. This time, he quickly said, "Only 800 yards to Central Park Zoo. There's an orangutan there that looks like a tenor I know." We visited the orangutan. About 1,200 yards further on Broadway, we stopped in front of a grocery store displaying a barrel of pickles. Chaliapin stared at the pickles for a while. His doctor had forbidden him from eating them. "Wow, they look so good. Reminds me of my youth." As for me, I wondered why he hadn't fainted yet, but he seemed healthier than ever. We made one final stop on 90th Street to look at the fruit stands near the freshly painted tram station at 96th Street, and finally, we reached the hotel. Chaliapin smiled and said, "See, it wasn't far, right? Now let's go eat." After a hearty meal, he explained why he made me walk those 3 miles. He said solemnly, "You'll never forget today's walk. I taught you a small lesson. Never worry about how far the goal is. Just think about what's 100 yards away. Don't fret about an uncertain future. Just focus on tomorrow's small joys, no matter how trivial they may seem." Years have passed. Mr. Chaliapin has passed away, but most of those milestones from our walk are unforgettable, even though the scenery has changed. Over the years, his practical philosophy has helped me greatly. It helped me when I decided to learn English. I never asked myself, how many years will it take to master this language? Instead, I told myself, today, there are 28 words in the Times newspaper I don't know. Tomorrow, there will be fewer than 20. This philosophy also kept me motivated when, due to my partner's mistakes, I had to pay creditors half of what I hoped to earn in the next 4 years. If I had dwelled on the hardship during those 208 weeks, I would have lost hope and not earned a dime. Instead, I reassured myself, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I'll make it work for me. Thinking this way changed everything. I paid off my debts and made a living without hardship. Chaliapin's 100-step rule is golden. Anyone who follows it can see its benefits. The goal might seem incredibly far, but it's only 100 yards to 6th Avenue. By tackling each stage one at a time, we not only reach our goals but also enjoy the journey.
Hey everyone, your comments truly matter, offering insights and motivation to others and uplifting our creative team at Lighthouse of Wisdom channel. Sharing your thoughts and experiences enriches our community. So, let's get the conversation started below and help illuminate our path with your wisdom.